We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And I guess I'll start off by talking about the only news that anybody in North America has been following. Congratulations to the Abbotsford Canucks on winning the Calder Cup. I'm sure that means a ton to Tom and the rest.
Does my wide-eyed blank stare not give away my excitement at whatever the heck words you just put together in an order that I've never heard before in my life?
I don't want to get into all the incredibly depressing news that took place over the weekend. So I will say there's the NHL. You're familiar with that, professional hockey.
Yes.
And then similar to other sports, all the major NHL teams have farm teams. Which are, their prospects, or if somebody gets injured and then is coming back, they, work down in the farm team for a while before coming back. So that is the AHL. That's the American Hockey League. That's the league that is one rung down from the NHL. They are still professional hockey players, full-time professional hockey players, but, not making the sort of money and not playing as many games as the NHL league. So, the AHL is one rung down. The Vancouver Canucks, of course, is the team that I cheer for, being my local NHL team, and their farm team is the Abbotsford Canucks, Abbotsford is just a suburb of Vancouver, and that was only a couple of years ago that they actually brought the farm team over to Abbotsford. Before, they were in various places across North America, and so they finally moved it to Abbotsford. So the Vancouver farm team has never won the Calder Cup before. The Calder Cup is the prize that you win after the end of the year if you're the best team in the AHL Hockey League. So first time in franchise history, and the Abbotsford Canucks did it in 6 games. So congrats to them. It was very exciting. That was last night as we're recording this on Tuesday. They won that on Monday night over in North Carolina.
And all I'm going to say is that I shouldn't have joked about World War III last week. That's all I'm going to say.
Right.
I think we can all blame me. I'm sorry.
You weren't the only one. Definitely not.
I did not know my power.
Supposedly, as we're recording this, although I wasn't checking the news this morning, and heaven knows world news is changing on a somewhat minute-by-minute basis as we're talking about things right now. But last I heard, isn't there supposed to be a ceasefire? Is that?
No, that didn't last.
Oh. I already missed that.
I think only one person thought there was going to be a ceasefire, and
it was announced.
He wanted it to be.
Well, according to Reuters, Iran agreed to it, and so we're talking about the Israeli-Iran conflict, because also heaven knows there are multiple conflicts happening in the world right now. So that is the one in particular we're mentioning.
I don't know. I'm not paying much attention to it either, because I can't do anything about it, and I've got other things in my life to worry about. And I know that sounds terrible, but I mean. And I've said this to my wife and family many times. I'm like, there's this think globally, act locally.
Sure.
That used to be like a catchphrase that was running around. And I was always like, that's feels stupid. But the older I get, the more it makes sense, because you're like, there is nothing I can do about that, except for when there is something I can do about that, like come voting time. I can do something about that.
Yep.
But for right now, I can't do anything about that. But what I can do is things locally that, are a small step towards that. It's sort of, if you think about it from the perspective of, garbage, you can't pick up every piece of garbage in the United States or the world, but you can, as you're walking down the street, every once in a while pick up a piece of garbage if you see one.
In your neighborhood, yes. Yeah.
That may not change the global amount of garbage in the world, but it will if everybody did a little bit of that. If everybody
did it, yes. Right.
Yeah, then that would make a big difference. So as much as I can, I'm doing things to make the world better around me and not worse. And as I do that, hopefully other people are also doing that, and eventually the world will become not worse. Because right now we seem to be spiraling. But
it has not been a good news weekend, which is
no, it has not.
Which is why I focused on hockey for a little while.
There you go. I was focused on shopping for houses again because we're still
Right.
doing that. And it's I will say that my wife is leaving on like Friday. She is going to that camp that my son's going to be. My son is currently at, that Boy Scout camp. And she's going with a troop that he is a member of because they're going up there for the week because that's how long these Boy Scout camps last. Or I shouldn't call them Boy Scout camps; they're just Scout camps now.
Okay.
So it's a hard habit to break, but believe me, it's not. It's unintentional and no slight. It's not like me trying to say that they never should have changed. I think that Scouts are much better now that they have are more inclusive because
it's a good name. It makes sense.
It does
Scouts.
make sense.
Yeah.
I will tell you that all the scouting groups that I've been a part of that have been more inclusive are universally better than the ones that are not. I mean, just like you put a bunch of teenage boys in a room, ain't nothing get done.
Ooh, I've got some comments coming up in the What We Watch section that are going to be germane to that topic. Yeah.
You add a couple of females in there, and all of a sudden, everything is organized. And I don't feel like that's a misogynistic thing to say, but I think it's that age group, they mature at different rates, and and their brains function differently.
I don't know if it's just that age group.
It might not be.
It seems to go along for a pretty long stretch of time in our lifespan.
Maybe forever. So my wife's going up there next week, so she'll be gone all week, and I'll be home alone with my middle son, who is never here and barely talks to me anyways, because that's the age he's at.
Yeah.
And when I was his age, I was exactly the same way. So I have no ill will towards him whatsoever, except that it bugs me that he's so like me and I don't like him. And I'm like, boy, you remind me of me. And boy, I was a jerk.
First time that's ever happened in history, Tom, is recognizing things in your child that you're like, it kind of reminds me of myself. And then maybe not being so pleased with it. The first time ever. You're the only one.
It's the first. I might be the only one. That's
unique
right.
situation.
A unique situation over here. So he is always out and about, and he'll be very happy to have a vehicle that he won't have to share with my wife or me, because he took my vehicle yesterday, and I was like, where the hell is my car? So I will be home alone, and then the week after that I will be gone. So we will have a guest host for me that week, and I don't know who it is. It's going to be very exciting, and I will be listening intently.
Things will
always do.
Yeah. Right. When is the last time you've actually from tip to tail listened to a whole AVRant episode? Is that
the last time I listened to an entire AVRant episode? It was because I had to re-record something.
Or that is going back a ways.
There was an episode I did with Ara and Braden.
Okay.
Many years ago, where my audio came out really bad.
Was that even an AV rant, or was that an AV After Dark?
I think it was an AV After Dark.
That sounds like an AV After Dark, yeah.
And I had to re-record every word I said. So I would listen to myself and then say it at the same time in the same inflection. And then I've
done that for individual words or phrases here and there throughout history, but it's not the entire episode. I've never done that.
No, I
so you did ADR, but for the whole thing.
Yes. Yes. House hunting is, I think today's Tuesday, right? So I think tomorrow we're supposed to, for the first time, meet with our real estate agent and go see a couple of places that haven't been open houses, but my wife wants to see before she leaves to go.
By appointment only.
Yes. Some of them are, and some of them we have already seen. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I have no hope that we're any closer to finding anything. For those of you who have been house hunting, you know how this process works. You go in there kind of wide-eyed, like, we're just going to look to see what's there, and then we're going to find the perfect house, and it'll be great. This always happens. And then you start to narrow down what you're like, what we really need is this, 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 and this.
Okay.
And then you have this master list of things that you really want. Sure. And it all has to fit within the price point. And none of this is realistic. Like, maybe that house is out there, but you might have to wait 20 years to find the right combination of things, and then get lucky enough to have them accept your
specialized are the things you're looking for in a house?
Well, it doesn't make any difference. I mean, people get really unreasonable. If you ever watch House Hunters, you know people become.
But, isn't that dramatized? Don't they make that up?
Nah, it's pretty close.
Okay.
Other than everybody walking in and going, "Oh, nice size bathroom. Oh, nice size room." And every room they walk into is a nice size. I walked into one place this weekend where I was like, "This woman is giant. Look at how tall she is." And then she wasn't that much taller than me. I'm not tall, but she wasn't that much taller than me. It was just the ceilings were really low.
Okay.
And it was throwing me off. I was like, "This is a hobbit hole." But so we are now in the phase of where my wife has decided she's definitely wants certain things.
Sure.
And I am of the opinion that that what she wants and what is available and the price point that she wants to hit
it's the price
are
point
not
thing.
compatible.
Yeah.
So, and that's fine because this is part of the process. And I think all real estate agents know this. And, at some point we're going to find something that's close enough or whatever that it's all going to kind of mesh. And invariably what happens is somebody says, boy, I wish we would have made a bid on, we would have bought that one house because that one was good enough. But at the time I was not in the right mental space to make an offer. So we'll see what happens. Okay. We're going to go see a couple, maybe 3 or 4 on Wednesday. I'm taking off work and she's taking off work to go do it. And we'll see what happens. And then maybe we will. Maybe we'll find something. Maybe the perfect house is just around the corner.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Maybe there'll be months and months of us doing this nonsense. It's really, there's no end to it. And you have to be, if you're anxious about things, house hunting is just not for you. You have to be mellow and you have to force yourself to be mellow. Because if not, you'll just...
And everything takes longer than you expect it to.
Yes. The whole process takes longer than you expect it to. So it's fine. We are getting there. But that's kind of where we are. And then, like I said, we're going to go. I'll be gone for a week. We have a family reunion we're going to. Been planning for years to go to one that they keep pushing back because of things. So we'll be in Colorado for a week.
Ooh, okay.
And I will not be talking to anybody.
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now, I will be gone. And then I will have hopefully lots of things to report. All right. So, what's up with you, Rob?
Not really too much has been going on my neck of the woods. We were talking very briefly before we began recording, not to rub it in, but it's actually been really nice weather in my neck of the woods. And I know there are many people across North America who are experiencing quite the heat dome, horrible heat wave effect. I'm not going to rub that in at all. But I'll just say, if you were worried about me and how things are going, then happy to report that for now, for the time being, fingers crossed, knock on wood, it's been very pleasant over in my way. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's equally unpleasant as it's supposed to be at this time of year. We've already been in the heat wave for a while, so we're kind of like, it's hot. But for those of you that are living in places, and I've lived in places and visited places where not only were they having a heat wave, but it's not the type of place that does well with heat waves.
Okay, yeah.
Australia as a whole refuses to believe that AC is a thing that they should have, which is stupid, but whatever. But we were in Adelaide, which is sort of like their Washington, D.C., if I remember correctly.
Okay.
I think that's right. And it was like 40-something degrees Celsius, which is stupid hot.
Yep. Yep.
And everybody, and Perth, when we lived there, when it got real hot like that, it never got quite that hot. But when it gets real hot, all of a sudden everybody's real interested in going to the movies and the library.
Yeah. So here in Lower Mainland BC, we are not set up for heat. If it gets above 33, problems really start happening. So yeah.
Right. So for those of you that are suffering through this, hopefully stay safe and do all the things that you need to do to stay cool. I don't know what those things are, but I guess go to the library. Libraries are great. Yeah. For as long as they're funded.
When it did get just up to and just slightly over 40 degrees here that one year, which is horrible when the heat dome was centered right over Lower Mainland BC, and I hope that never happens again, although I'm sure it will at some point. But I just kept myself doused in water, basically. That was my solution. Just like, it's going to splash some water on myself and not put a towel on, and that'll keep me going for the next 15 minutes.
When there was a heat wave in Los Angeles, when I was there, we had an AC in only our bedroom.
Yeah.
And this is when my wife was we just had our first child, and he was, feeding nonstop. He was like a 24-hour feeding session, and she was trapped in there. But it was the only AC. I took shower after shower, cold shower after cold shower after cold shower after cold shower, because I could not handle.
No, I filled up my bathtub once, and I would just dip myself in every now and then.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So I guess we're on to what we watched.
We are. We're on to what we watched. Let's crack on.
My wife had decided as we were driving around, we're driving towards home again. This seems to be a thing that as we're driving home, she said, "Man, everything we're watching right now is heavy. We're watching a bunch of heavy stuff." So we were watching Reacher, which we started and did not finish. And then we're almost done with Night Agent, but it got too tense and she doesn't want to watch it anymore. So it's only 2 episodes left. Let's just finish it. She's like, it's too tense. It makes me not be able to sleep. I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do here? So she's like, I want something light. So I texted a friend and she said, watch Nobody Wants This on Netflix.
Okay.
So Nobody Wants This got Kristen Bell and a Brody person, one of the Brodies.
One of the Brodies, Adrian Brody.
It's not Adrian. Isn't Adrian the real big movie actor? Right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not him.
Okay.
It's another Brody. I will look it up in a second.
I don't
but right
know that
now,
many Brodies.
I think there's at least more than one.
I'm sure.
But there's at least more than one. What's this? Anyways, so it's like a romantic comedy TV series. It's 10 episodes.
Okay.
Adam Brody.
Yes, Adam
See?
Brody. Yeah.
There is another one.
Was he in the OC? Is that where he got his thing?
Probably. Who cares? I don't know. I don't know these things. I didn't watch the OC. That show. I was too old for that.
I think that was the one. Mine. That's the connection that formed in my brain.
Anyway, Kristen Bell, of course, is phenomenal because she's phenomenal in everything. She's great. It is, to me, amazing. Like, you're like, if you watch... So sometimes you'll see a person on the movie or a TV show, and you're like, oh my God, they look so whatever it is. Okay. You decide what it is. And then you see a picture of them like on the red carpet, or maybe them walking on the red carpet. You're like, oh my God, that's the same person? Doesn't even look the same. Yeah. This show, I mean, she's still, beautiful or whatever. She does not look like the same person that was on, to me, she does not look like the same person that was on A Good Place. Yeah. Like the photography is just not as good.
Okay.
All right. You know what I'm saying? The cinematography, if you will, is just not as good to me. I've seen her commercials for whatever, I think CarMax or one of those things. Okay. And I also thought the same thing there. I was like, she looks totally different than she looks in The Good Place. And The Good Place is just, I don't know if it's the makeup, if it's the lighting, if it's the angles they're using, or all three put together and more. She just doesn't look to me as natural as she does in The Good Place. She looks a little bit more worked on with that. Whatever. And maybe things have changed for her. I don't know, but she's still amazing.
Time has passed.
Yeah, she's still amazing in this, and I love her performance. And Adam Brody is also amazing. I love him in this. Yeah, he's always good. So it's funny. It's not ha funny. It's not It's not like a sitcom. But it's like a romantic comedy. Okay. And it's we watched 3 episodes. There's only 10, and hopefully we'll get through the whole thing. We'll see if she decides that's too tense at some point. But we've watched 3 episodes, and the premise is that she and her sister do a podcast, which of course in this world, they're gonna sell it for millions of dollars.
Okay, yeah.
Because that's how these things work. We're also going to sell this podcast for millions of dollars.
Sure.
Any day now.
As soon as that offer comes along, why not?
So the 2 sisters have a podcast called Nobody Wants This, which is the name of the show. And so they kind of just talk about their life, but also there's a lot of talk about sex and empowerment, and that they're free to talk about whatever they want. Sure. And it allows their listeners to kind of free them up to feel okay discussing some of these things. At least that's sort of the gist of it. Yep. And then she, at a dinner party, runs into this man who we see at the very beginning, has just split with his fiancée, and it turns out that he's a rabbi. And so she's this free spirit, atheist, totally out there as far as sexuality and stuff, woman. And he is this sort of repressed,
a little bit
buttoned up rabbi guy.
Okay.
And that's the whole
opposites attract.
I know,
Never been
right?
done before. That's
the first time
it is,
Rob. No one's ever made
so
this
creative.
plot before. But it's done very well.
Good.
And it so far, at least, the first 3 episodes. So if you're looking for something light and kind of funny, but not too deep, there's like each one of them has a sibling, and the sibling is like a little bit more extreme version of them. So, he's got this brother who's goofy and overly confident and married to an extremely, I don't want to say toxic, but let's just say she's quite overbearing woman. And then Kristen Bell's sister is even more what she is, more out there, more opinionated, and more willing to talk about things and say things that maybe you're like, well, you could have held that one back. But it's a fun little show. So far, if you're looking for something fun, that's.
Okay.
I mean, I would recommend Kristen
Worth
Bell
checking
reading
out.
the newspaper.
Yeah.
So that's it. Go on.
Alrighty. So I watched one movie this week, which was Mickey 17. That did come out just earlier this year. I was interested in this because written and directed by Bong Joon-ho, who is the South Korean director-writer who did The Host and Snowpiercer and most notably Parasite. Oscar-winning film there. And so I have really enjoyed the majority of his previous films, so I was very much looking forward to Mickey 17. This is starring Robert Pattinson and Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette.
Right. Lots and lots and lots of ads for this movie.
Yep.
Lots of ads for this movie.
This is a future setting where we have mastered, as a human race, we have mastered interplanetary travel. We are going out and colonizing other planets. But it's an interesting sort of depiction of a future human civilization because they've sort of taken today's political and religious climate and sort of exaggerated it. So we're even more divided on Earth, even more cult-like with whatever group we're subscribing to. And so very, very separated, very, very divided. And so basically each group on Earth is looking for their own separate planet to colonize so that they can have their way of life and get away from everybody else's way of life and just be like, this is going to be the way we do things. And so the one group that we're following, led by Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette, in a very, very obvious and on-the-nose Donald Trump impression, which, Mark Ruffalo has been very, very outspoken on social media against Donald Trump, so he is having himself a time parodying
I'm sure he is.
that character, but turning him not just into a political leader, but also just an outright religious cult leader. So that they say that's the sort of exaggeration that we're, take everything a step farther than things are today.
Exaggeration. Go on.
Overtly religious, let's say, is the slight difference there. But on this particular expedition, the idea is that, they're going to be facing new environments and things that human beings simply have not been exposed to before. And so they have one person on this expedition who is designated as the expendable. And they are the expendable in that, hey, first person to go and breathe this environment without a space helmet on, send out the expendable. And the reason they can do this is because they have now mastered the technology they don't just say clone someone, they talk about printing a human being, printing a
like
copy.
3D printing them. Yeah, that's kind of
that's nice. Comes out of a body 3D printer, and so they have somehow figured out how to save the memories of the existing body and then upload it into the newly printed body whenever the original expendable body dies. But there are laws about it, because when it first started happening, of course, there ended up with duplicates, and then that led to all kinds of new types of crimes that had never existed before. So the law is that you can only have one at a time. And so we are following Mickey 17, as you can guess, the 17th version of this expendable person. And so all of that sounds pretty interesting, right? All of that sounds like, hey, yeah, that's a movie I'm interested in watching. Good actors are involved. A writer and director that I really, really like, has certainly done creative things in the past. And I'm very disappointed to say that I didn't care for this movie very much. And so, like, the premise is interesting. The effects in it are good. This didn't have a massive budget, but Bong Joon-ho has been very, very good about using limited budgets with well done effects work. There is a notable alien species on the planet that they go to colonize, and there's interaction with that. But yeah, the issue that I had was, like, this felt like a movie where the beginning of it, where we're getting sort of the backstory, that I did find interesting, and we were setting up all these new ideas. But once we get the setup and the backstory and how we arrived at, the current situation, where it goes from there really was one of those, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened type of narratives. And it doesn't always make sense, and there's kind of like shocks and twists that, like, they don't carry any weight because there was no anticipation for it. It's just a thing that happens out of nowhere and doesn't really have much consequence. You would think, with the premise that I just outlaid, that something about cloning, human printing, the expendable character, like, would be the resolution to everything that happens in this movie. Like, you would just expect that as a narrative device, right? And It's like, well, not really. Like, it just kind of, a bunch of stuff happens, one event after another, and it doesn't really add up to anything meaningful or impactful. And I was really quite disappointed by that. It felt like they were just kind of going along on the fly and didn't really have a point to make, which seemed really unusual for this writer-director. I don't know what happened here. I wish I could give it a much higher thumbs up. Maybe it's just me. Like, the premise was really interesting. Maybe you, a different viewer, will have a different experience with it. But I didn't. I also, this is all spoken in English. It's not the first time that Bong Joon-ho has done that. Snowpiercer was spoken in English as well.
Which was an excellent movie. Yeah,
but the script in this, like, I just got really tired of that. This had the thing where, when the characters curse and swear in this movie, they, like, really emphasize the curse word, like, unnaturally so, where it's like,
okay,
we're gonna say it. We're gonna say the F word. Here it is. And it's like, why? It doesn't sound like natural cursing. It was like, oh, we're gonna do it. We're doing an R rating this time, and it's because of the language. And it was like, what? Why? Why does it sound like that? It's just, I don't know. I didn't love this movie. So let's get away from that, unfortunately. I watched a couple of, I would call it like limited series. It's not exactly a full season of television. It's a couple of limited series. I wanted to check out James Gunn's first entry into the new DC universe because he's got Superman. Coming out next month, which is going to be the first major motion picture in the new James Gunn-led DC universe, supposedly rebooting things. All the DC Comics characters were getting away from the Snyderverse, and we're going to do a new thing. So the first official part of the James Gunn DC universe is Creature Commandos, which is an animated series that's on HBO Max. Up here, I had to do a trial of Slack TV because that's where it's carried in Canada, which was a horrible experience. You have to pay for Slack TV in Canada. I did a 7-day trial, so I didn't have to pay for it. But if you subscribe for a month, you have to pay. They still have ads, and it's the horrible thing of, they show you the exact same 30-second ad like 7 times in a 20-minute episode. And I'm like, I'm gonna pay $13 a month and have that ad over and over and over again.
For this one ad.
It was horrific. I will tell you, I will never use Trivago up here in Canada, which is like compare all the various travel websites for you.
Yes. because of
maybe
that ad.
not Travago's fault, but that is the only ad I saw through 7 20-minute episodes, about 7 times per episode, and I have sworn off of that company forever because of that bad decision there. But Creature Commandos, like I say, this is animated series, 7 episodes, 20 minutes each, so basically an animated movie, and so James Gunn clearly loves his ensembles, and that's what this is. This is a different take on the Suicide Squad. This is non-human creatures forming their own Suicide Squad, which is the Creature Commandos. Now, the thing is, if you really want the entire story of James Gunn's DC universe, apparently the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker are still canon, because they are referencing things that happened in the Suicide Squad. So there was a movie called Suicide Squad, and then there was a Harley Quinn movie, Birds of Prey, and then there was The Suicide Squad by James Gunn, and that was kind of a soft reboot of things, although keeping Margot Robbie, as Harley Quinn. So that is canon, and Peacemaker is canon, and season 2 of Peacemaker is also going to be canon. So they're keeping Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, although she played it in Suicide Squad and Birds of Prey. So it's like there's some weird little mixing and matching of former Snyderverse stuff coming.
You don't get rid of the only good things from the movies that's pretty much didn't do so well. Yeah, I mean, you don't get rid of them.
But yeah, so yeah, if you want to start, it's basically the things that James Gunn already did are continuing on as canon into this new universe. So I really liked Creature Commandos. Putting aside the horrible experience of Slack TV and their ads, that's not the show's fault. I really did enjoy this. It absolutely is the very same tone as the Suicide Squad, but with a new group of characters. So you've got the Bride of Frankenstein, you've got sort of a spin on the creature from the Black Lagoon, you've got Frankenstein's monster himself. You've got a robot that was built during World War II to exclusively hunt Nazis and is very disappointed that the German Nazis don't exist anymore, but he finds other Nazis. Not surprisingly.
Say he's not looking very close. Look around.
Not too much of a challenge. So several other non-human creatures that are involved in this. And yes, it is gory. It is sexual. James Gunn definitely enjoys throwing in some immature humor from time to time, but he does his James Gunn thing of also making it touching, having touching moments, genuinely so, and getting you to care about these characters. And when one of them dies, because this is like a Suicide Squad thing, so there is going to be a death in this group. It's like, oh, you actually, I was genuinely sad for that character to die. And of course, being comic book, they could always come back at some point, but within the context of this story, they are dead and gone, and it does affect the rest of the team. And I felt it as a viewer, and so yeah, I really enjoyed this show. So if you can check out Creature Commandos, hopefully in a better experience than I had. I think it's worth watching, and yeah, I had a good time with it. And like I say, it's basically a movie, just divided up into 7 episodes. So lastly, I watched another miniseries. This is 4 episodes, but each episode is about an hour in length, and this is on Netflix. And Tom T, not you, Tom, but a different Tom, requested twice to me. He's like, before you stop subscribing to Netflix, because he heard me say I'm only doing it for 1 month, and yes, I snuck this in just under the wire. He's like, you gotta check out this show on Netflix called Adolescence. So I think this just came out last year, although it's set in 2022, so recent past. So this was co-created by Stephen Graham, who also stars in it as the father of this family. So this is all set in the UK. It was all shot in the UK. And I guess I'll start by saying the technical side of this, which is a very notable feature of these 4 episodes in this series, which is that every single episode is a single take. And it is genuinely a single
I did hear about this.
Yeah. This one does not do any hidden cuts. They don't have any, a character walks across in the foreground and they hid a cut that way. They straight up did a single take to film each episode. So it is like watching a play. Because you go to a stage play and they're not doing retakes and things like that. It's like, so this had to be rehearsed. And so some of the actors who were involved in this, they said it was like, actors who have experience on the stage. They're like, this was an even more collaborative process because it really was like a dance with the camera crew and with all the other, non-actors who are on set but have to be all coordinated. Everybody has to move like a well-oiled machine and a unit together because the camera is constantly in motion, and they used these smaller cameras that can be mounted onto a drone, unclipped and put onto a gimbal, handheld, moved onto a dolly, like, because they take a single camera, they roll it for an hour, and that is what you end up seeing.
It's crazy.
So that is crazy on a technical level that they did it that way. And it does lead to some interesting aspects of this show, which is like, if somebody is getting a coffee out of a machine, you watch that in real time because there's no cut. So you're not skipping forward the 45 seconds while they wait for the coffee machine to work. It's like, nope, you're just going to stand there in silence in front of the coffee machine and wait for the coffee to be made because it's a single take, no cuts. And that's going to go on. When they're driving from one place to another, the camera gets in the car or gets mounted on the hood or maybe flies in a drone beside the car, but you just take the entire car ride with them, and maybe they're talking, maybe they're not, but it's all in real time as it actually happens. So they had to carefully scout the location because they have to have the family's house, the school for the main character, the 13-year-old boy who's the main character, his school. There's a police station. Like they had to scout where they could do that, where the length of driving in real time wasn't going to be so distant and long that it wouldn't work for this show. So on a technical level, real challenges, but they absolutely pulled it off. I liked the moments where an actor kind of just started a sentence and then repeated themselves like real life because they were slightly stumbling over their word or something. They're like, no, it's one take, And look, in real life, sometimes you start a sentence and then you correct yourself or say something again. We just don't often see that in a television show because normally they'd cut and do a second take, but not so in this. There aren't very many outright mistakes like that, and I'm sure I missed. The people are going to point out little flubs and stuff in the background that got missed. Some camera person who didn't get out of the way in time of the frame or something like that, but I didn't particularly pick it up because I was riveted by this show. It is stellar. Some of the, in particular, episode 3. Which was a real challenge to shoot and write, I would imagine, because it essentially takes place in a single room. And it's like, well, what do? You got one camera, one room, and 2 actors, and you're going to do that for a whole hour and somehow keep it visually interesting. So it's like, yeah, the camera is moving, doing some close-ups. Thankfully avoided doing the spinning in circles too much, although they do circle the characters at times. But the performances of the 13-year-old boy played by Owen Cooper and by Aaron Doherty playing his psychologist or a court psychologist who's coming in there to evaluate him. What a 2-person performance. I mean, that is a 1-hour stage play playing out in front of you on your screen, and holy smokes. Like what those two did on screen in that hour was riveting and amazing. So the basic premise of this show is early on, couple of police detectives and the equivalent of a UK SWAT team bust down the door of just a very normal looking family, mother, father, son, and daughter, bust down their door and arrest the 13-year-old boy for suspected murder. That is the hook of this show. And as they say right then, early on in the show, it's like they wouldn't have done this unless they have some very compelling evidence that the 13-year-old boy did in fact commit this murder, and that is the case. And I don't want to give away any more than that because there are some reveals in the very first episode that I don't want to give away any more than that. But yeah, it is following that. And so Stephen Graham has said that the inspiration for this show was in the UK. About a year before, like 2020, 2021 timeframe, they had this string of stabbings that took place in the UK, all of them done by young men or adolescent boys against girls or very young women. Some of them resulted in fatalities. Most of them resulted in, hospitalizations and injuries and not outright deaths. But he was just like, what the heck is going on? Like, what has happened? There were like 4 in a row in 1 year. And so this is a fictionalized take. It's not based on any one of those particular stories, but just trying to sort of delve into what could cause, this sort of violence and this sort of behavior to be happening. And if I have a criticism of this show, it's that this show is entirely from the male perspective. It's a female victim in this, and we, as the audience, essentially get to know nothing about her. We don't meet her family. We don't get anything from that side of the story except for one of her friends at school. She gets a little bit of time in this, but it is a very male-centric, male perspective of this. But I won't criticize it too much because this is a limited series and it has a focus and it has a story to tell and it is asking a very important question and it's trying to explore a focused take on this and to try and dig into this. So it is a bit tough because it's like, okay, we're really only focusing on the perpetrators side of this, and that is an ill in society at large, where we focus so much on the perpetrators of crimes and almost forget about the victims. And unfortunately, that happens in this show as well. But then you can say, hey, it's a pretty accurate reflection of society and how things are talked about. So ask some heavy questions. If you are trying to get away from heavy material, this ain't the show. This is as heavy as it gets. But riveting, thought-provoking, tremendous performances, amazing technical achievement. So Tom T, thank you very much for the recommendation. I absolutely, it's sticking in my mind, this one. I'm thinking about it a lot. And if you are prepared to delve into some very difficult to stomach topics and really confront some hard emotional performances in that, then Adolescence comes very, very highly recommended from me.
All right. There you go. You got stuff to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Light stuff from me and heavy stuff from Rob.
Well, Creature Commandos isn't too heavy, although it is violent and sad in moments, but it's James Gunn. You know the style.
Yeah. And then it does explain why there's so many characters in the new Superman movie, because the man does like his ensemble.
Oh, he likes his ensemble, yes.
You're like, it's a Superman movie, but there sure seems to be a lot of other characters in this thing. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Come to the website. You can comment. No, you can't comment. Come to the website, find our shows or show notes, or older shows and show notes. They have links to all the articles and products we'll be referring to, as well as a Flickr album that you can follow along with the pictures that we will talk about.
That's right.
And reference. If you're like, I don't understand what they're saying. Well, now you can. Let's see here. You can find us on Facebook.com/AVRant Podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant, where you can see those pictures embedded in our video of us just talking to each other.
You can leave comments there.
You can.
Comments are on our YouTube.
That's right. But mostly get deleted because people are awful.
Some do. Yeah.
Some do, yeah. Rob at avrant.com. His socials is at First Reflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, support the podcast in some way. If you want to do that monetarily, you can go to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and send us a PayPal donation, or you can go to patreon.com/AVRant Podcast to be a monthly contributor. Right now we have 131 patrons over at patreon.com. So thank you very much to all of our patrons.
That is right. Once again, that is patreon.com/AVRant Podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So a big thank you to our 131 patrons over there.
So if you can't support us financially, support us in some other way, and we'll mention you here. One of the ways you can, and if whatever, it doesn't make any difference. Just support us and let us know what it is.
Yeah.
If we don't know what it is, you have to tell us, though.
That's right.
So Infinite Gary sent us a Fandango at home code to test, this is actually going to be useful information for some of you because it was season 7 of Outlander or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Which is, it did work, except the way that Fandango at home works. First of all, I tried to redeem it at Movies Anywhere, and it didn't work. It says that the code's not valid. Okay. So I went to Fandango at home, and Fandango at home makes you look up what you're about to redeem.
Okay.
Before you can redeem it. I don't know why. The code is unique anyway, so I don't know what the point of this is, other than just to AI something. I don't know, to stop the bots or whatever. So I had to look up Outlander Season 7, except Outlander Season 7 is not on the list. It does not exist. they go at home. Like it's not there. It only goes up to 6. So I clicked on 6. For those of you that ever run into this, I clicked on 6 and I put in the code and it was like, you've redeemed 7.
Okay.
So Gary, if you were having problems redeeming it, it was because of that. And now I have solved this for you. You can redeem it for yourself.
I see, yes.
It works. Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary, regardless.
We also got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from John, Ryan, Jack, who's a member of the 2 Hour Plus Club, an original member of the 2 Hour Plus
going
Club.
way back.
And he wants us to watch The Life of Chuck, which he says is like an onion.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it has layers.
It has layers.
Or it stinks.
One or the other. Or both.
One or the other. Probably.
Stinky
Maybe it's
layers.
both. Maybe it's a stinky layer
It could be.
thing. Anyways, I've heard very good things about The Life of Chuck. I also heard that Stephen King, who wrote the story that this movie is, based on, says the best adaptation of anything he's ever written.
I don't know if that really means great things because, some of the things that Stephen King has hated the most of adaptations of his work are some excellent, excellent movies. So.
And there are books that he's written that he does not remember because he was on all the drugs.
That's right.
So let's not put too much stock into what he says, but that's what I've heard. I don't know if that's true or not. So Miguel and Zeke also said this, and it's a gratitude. So it was John, Ryan, Jack, Miguel, and Zeke. Thank you for thanking us.
Yeah, and I'll say the names one more time. We got John, Ryan, Jack, Miguel, and Zeke. Thank you very much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement. We really appreciate them. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
So in the news, I guess in the ongoing legal battle between Digital Trends and their former TV reviewer and YouTube host Caleb Denison, I think we talked about this a while back.
We
right?
did, and that's why I wanted to give the little bit of update that we have at this point. Yeah. For anybody who's mildly following along but getting their news about this from AVRant, I figured I'd toss in a little update here.
Boy, you're making some questionable decisions if you're getting the news from us. There really isn't that much going to be shared publicly at this point, but for anyone who has not been following the story, Caleb decided to part ways with Digital Trends back in April to begin his own solo YouTube and social media channel, which is CalebRated. Mm-hmm. Initially, Digital Trends thanked him for his years of service and publicly wished him well, but then they issued copyright strikes against the first couple of videos that he posted on his new YouTube channel and sued him to prevent him from moving forward with his own business. Since then, public comments have been extremely limited, but Caleb posted briefly on Threads just to say that his lawyers are strongly advising him not to say anything.
Yeah.
This is what lawyers do.
Yeah.
For now, the most news we've gotten about the situation is from a different YouTube channel, which is New Stuff TV. I've never heard of this channel. I haven't heard of any of these channels. I know what Digital Trends exist.
Right.
I've never purposefully watched anything they've done. The host there posted an update a couple of weeks ago after having spoken off the record on the phone with Caleb. Obviously, no details are shared, as there is no desire to get into the mess of legal proceedings, because apparently Digital Trends is not playing. But the title for the video is "It's much worse than I thought." That's the title of the video.
Yeah.
And the first pinned comment is a link to Caleb's GoFundMe, which someone else set up for him. And Caleb is sort of avoiding mentioning it at first, but now that he is sharing it, as legal and personal costs add up. Caleb also commented on that video to say that the legal motions that have been filed are public record. So while he won't make any comments on any of it himself, at the direction, of course, of his lawyers. If you want to dig into public records to follow along to some extent, there's no stopping that. So we'll try to keep you guys posted on this, I guess. But, it stinks.
Yeah.
This basically is all I'm going to say about this. It stinks.
Well, and you have some experience separating from a established home theater, audio, video technology type of website. At the time that you left, it wasn't so much a YouTube entity. It is much more so now. But you have some experience with this, and it wasn't as bad as Caleb's experience here, but it wasn't completely smooth sailing either.
No, but it was definitely, you definitely have to tread lightly when you're doing these things and be very, very careful with what you're doing. So you as an individual, as you split off, have to protect yourself, but at the same time, the larger entity has a lot of power that they can exert over you, and it's a shame that it's gotten like this. And I'll be curious to see what the resolution is.
Yeah.
Because it could very well mean something to everybody else that's, going forward as they move away from larger entities.
And that's
and
largely why I am including it in our own AVRant news, because it's not affecting Tom or I directly right now.
No.
But there's it to do with YouTube as well, right? I mean, they're a gazillion times bigger than anything. Digital Trends is a fleck of dust compared to YouTube. And I mean, if YouTube somehow were to get involved in things, and we've got all types of, home theater AV creators who are predominantly putting their content out on YouTube, and so that's involved in this as well. Yeah.
So this is this may very well kind of feed into this idea that larger companies will not want to use real people to do their videos, and this idea of using a virtual or AI or a computer generated host to do the presenting of their videos. I mean, we've even seen this with voice actors, right? Like when the Batman guy got replaced on one of the games or the TV show or whatever it was, I don't remember. People were upset. They were like, wait a second, Kevin, whatever his name is Batman's voice. He is Batman's voice. And when they were like, no, well, he's cost too much now, we're going to use somebody else who sounds almost identical, because it's not like voices are all that unique anyways. They can be, I've literally been on, listened to radio to some, as I flipped over, they were interviewing, or they had a guest on who was a impressionist. And I was like, I had no idea for the first couple of minutes what the heck I was listening to.
The talented voice actors are very, very good mimics.
Yes. Yeah. So, they just were like, oh, we're going to pay this other person less. Yeah. And people got upset about it. So in order to stop that from happening, and for people becoming bigger or thinking that they're big enough that they can move out and have their own audience, those companies are like, well, you're cannibalizing our audience. Well, I mean,
it's just the stuff that was said on You Stuff TV, that title, if it isn't a hint to you, because many of us were picturing as like, okay, so you got to wait out the copyright strikes on YouTube. That's a several month long process. You're going to have some legal papers filed back and forth between Caleb and Digital Trends, and eventually there'll be a settlement, and you're like, okay, it's a bummer, it sucks, but it's basically kind of a waiting game, and that'll play out. It's like, nah, to say it's much worse than I thought, and to give the non-detailed but vague descriptions of the conversation that was had, it's like, oh, this is not sounding like you just wait a few months and things will blow over. It's unfortunately sounding more contentious than that. So,
when they
very unfortunate.
There's ways of handling this from the individual standpoint, and I don't know anything about this story other than what Rob has presented here. But there's also ways of handling it from the larger companies side. If they know that person's leaving, then it makes sense to co-host them, and then with a bunch of different
transition
people,
plan,
and then have a transition plan so that there's a continuity there, so that, because people, it's not like people will leave just because one person leaves, but they will leave. They will also follow that person someplace else, and you may lose some followers, but if you do an accurate, a really good transition, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. We've seen this on TV. We've seen this on, different TV shows where they've transitioned people in and out. There's always a dip, and then it comes back or whatever. Yeah. But the fact that Digital Trends is doing this,
unfortunately, as the much larger, much wealthier company, I'm not saying this is the case, but if the goal is essentially to just drag things out, which sometimes legally that is what one side is trying to do. It's not that they really expect that they're going to win or settle, but their whole goal is to just drag the process out for as long as possible. Unfortunately, that is that is very doable for the company that has a lot more money than the single defendant. So that I'm not saying that is the case, but it's easy to imagine how it could be.
I've never really understand that sort of vindictiveness when it comes down to it. It's like if you don't have just spending the amount of money that you'll have to spend. I mean, from the company's perspective, they have lawyers on retainer.
Yeah,
I would imagine and if the lawyers aren't doing anything, they still get paid. But if you have them do something, are you paying them that much more? I don't know how any of that works.
Yeah.
So maybe they're just like, well, it's not really costing us any more money, and we feel like this guy should, has harmed us in some way, so let's make him pay. That sort of vindictiveness does not reflect good on the company itself.
And again, we don't know that is the case. We're just saying it's easy to imagine how it could be.
Yeah. But from my perspective as, a content creator and somebody who's been online and alive for a lot of years, I really have a hard time supporting large corporations over individuals anyway. Right. So I'm kind of already on the side of the little guy. That's
most of us are in this one. Yes,
we don't really want to side with the prevailing power when the prevailing power is it's so lopsided as far as.
And especially when the public message is, we wish you well, thank you so much for all the years you spent with us, good luck in all your future endeavors, and copyright strike. Yeah. That doesn't look great.
Comments from one of our listeners, Andrew from AV Gadgets. Hey, Andrew. What's up, bro? He says, hey, how come Rob got Sassy's credit for saying early on that Paradigm's Founder series has some room for improvement and that the less expensive Premier series straight up sounds better, huh? Mm-hmm. Andrew wrote a review of the Premier bookshelf and center speakers back in 2021 over on AV Gadgets, I hope.
Yep. That is the link.
And he also compared them to the Founder Series bookshelf speakers at twice the price. Granted, he didn't post measurements to compare the two that way, but from his own listening comparisons, he came to the same conclusion. So that's 3 pairs of ears, including Sassy's own, that were all saying the same thing before Aaron's Audio Corner posted his clippable measurements just this year. So...
Yes, how dare I get credit for saying things that Sassy remembered. Andrew said the same things, possibly before I did.
Possibly. Who knows? Yeah. Whatever. I think you guys should fight.
I'm pretty sure he's going to win that one.
I feel like he's very tall.
The little bit that I know about Andrew, he is going to win that in every conceivable way.
Let's get to some questions here. John uses 5 Ascend acoustic speakers. Up front, he's got a pair of the original CBM 170 speakers and a CMT 340C center. They're all turned 20 years old this month.
Yeah, I like seeing that original design with those aerogel woofers. I just kind of like the way those original aerogel woofers with their actual phase plug in there. I remember and like how those used to look.
So he sits close. His ears are about 6.5 feet from center speaker, and if he measures from the tweeter of the center speaker to the inside edge of either bookshelf speaker, that distance is 32 inches, which is close. Okay.
Yeah.
The space from the inside edge, from the edge to inside edge of his front left and right speakers is about 64 inches. Mm-hmm. Is that far enough? And could he benefit from keeping the front left and right speaker stands exactly where they are, but turning his front pair of bookshelf speakers on their sides so their tweeters are on the outside edges and therefore slightly further apart from each other? So the way that I usually do this, and what he's not saying here, how many seats are on this couch? I can't see.
We don't exactly know. Yeah, it's not completely clear, but yeah, he's got a side by side love seats, like full individual recliners. So there's the 2 sets of armrests in between. So it does appear that there's the 2 seats, neither which looks like it's completely centered. It looks like the armrests are in line with the center speaker. Not a problem, but yeah, it looks like a two seat setup, but 2 fully separate recliners.
So when I set these things up, I usually look at not just the size of the screen or where the screen is in relation to anything, but how wide the couch is. That's sort of my go-to. Yeah. Like, your speakers have to be at least this wide. And this is if this is a 2-seater couch, in fact, and I'm wondering, based on The placement of the pillows and everything else, it kind of seems like maybe only one person sits in this room and really does anything.
Could be.
Because that other couch is full of pillows, and there's one seat that seems awfully empty, and there's like a drink in one of the drink holders. And so if it is only, in fact, one seat in here, I think making the placement slightly wider may help with stuff, but probably won't make that much of a difference. I would argue that getting rid of the center speaker would not make that much difference either. I think that you would probably feel like this is exactly the same experience.
For that second seat over to the left, that one, if you are
if somebody sits there.
Yes, probably,
if no one
probably
sits there,
would notice
then
the center speaker.
Yeah, if nobody sits there and it's just you in here sitting in that one seat, with that one blanket on it on the headrest, then I don't think that you're going to be noticing that big of a difference no matter what you do.
Yeah.
So that's it. I just think that. But if there is somebody in that other seat, then the center channel is important, and maybe widening the speakers to make sure that center, that left speaker is far enough out so that it clears the side of that couch. It would be important.
Yeah, I think what's at question here is we're basically asking angles versus rule of thumb advice. Because the sort of rule of thumb advice is that your front, left, and right speakers should be a minimum of 6 feet apart. That's just one of the rules of thumb of speaker setup that's out there. And these are less than 6 feet apart, at least in terms from inside edge to inside edge. They are, just slightly over 5 feet apart. But if we're going by the description here, if it's 32 inches from the tweeter of the center speaker to the inside edge of either the front left or the front right speaker, then there's another 4.5 inches from the inside edge of that speaker to the tweeter of the front left or the front right speaker. So if we total up all those distances and take the 6.5 foot distance from the center speaker to the ears of the listener in the primary seat that's sitting in front there, the way things are right now is actually a plus or minus 25 degree spread, which is more or less exactly what Dolby is recommending in terms of angles. Now, even if I was misinterpreting the description that was given, and the 32 inches is from the center speaker's tweeter to the tweeter of either of those speakers, so forget the distance from the inside edge to the tweeter, just that's from tweeter to tweeter is 32 inches. Even if that's the case, we are at exactly the way things are now, plus or minus 22.3 degrees, which is 0.2 of a degree less than Dolby's recommendation for the minimum angle. Plus or minus 22.5 degrees is the minimum recommendation for Dolby. So if that's the case, I mean, technically speaking, according to the angle recommendations, we're literally talking about wiggling them out 1 inch, or your idea of rotating them so that the tweeters are on, closer to the outside edges by laying them flat. That would also work, even if you did that and the original measurements that I mentioned are correct. You're still going to be within the Dolby spec, because the maximum they recommend is plus or minus 30 degrees. And you're not going to be going outside of that just by rotating the speakers or moving them about an inch farther out to either side. But yes, when you are sitting this close, the angles, the physical distances that you move things in order to change the angle is a very small number of inches that you move something, and the angle changes fairly significantly. But the bottom line is, you don't need to move your speakers at all. You are within Dolby spec as they are, and that rule of thumb is more or less assuming something around a 10-foot distance. That's part of the rule of thumb, is that it's basically assuming about a 10-foot listening distance, at which point they say, okay, don't have them any closer together than 6 feet apart, because if you do, at a 10-foot viewing distance, you're going to be closer together than plus or minus 22.5 degrees. Like, that's how all of that works out. But you're sitting closer than average in this setup, and therefore you don't need to move anything.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I forgot to do this. Yeah, there you go. Henry appreciated talking through his concerns, or us talking through his concerns about potentially buying a Kaleidoscape system, and it was Also helpful to hear our thoughts about Movies Anywhere and his 2 Panasonic UB9000 Ultra HD Blu-ray players. Since he has firmly decided not to buy a Kaleidoscape now, he wanted to know what we think about his current plan. He currently owns around 175 Ultra HD Blu-ray titles. He considers them all to be movies he cannot live without.
Mm-hmm.
I argue that is not true, but let's continue as somebody who has lost every movie.
Yeah.
I'm still alive. Therefore, it was worth buying them on physical disc, in his opinion. We mentioned how, if he ever does end up getting a Kaleidoscape, they have their disc-to-digital system, which would allow him to buy Kaleidoscape store versions of a lot of those same movies, but at a substantial discount. However, the disc-to-digital system requires physically confirming the discs in a USB optical drive, and that only works for 1080p Blu-rays, not Ultra HD Blu-rays. As we pointed out, up until recently, almost all Ultra HD Blu-rays came with a 1080p Blu-ray version in the box, and that was definitely the case with his collection. But since he was only interested in the Ultra HD discs, he actually gave away almost all of those 1080p Blu-ray discs. So that disc-to-digital system for Kaleidoscape isn't going to do him any good, is it?
Nope, not unless you can reacquire those 1080p Blu-rays, or if Kaleidoscape ever updates that system to be able to work with 4K Ultra HD Blu-rays, which is not completely out of the question, but as it stands today, they only confirm on the 1080p Blu-ray discs. Yeah.
So he owns the movies he cannot live without on discs. Mm-hmm. And then for the movies that he wants but doesn't consider essential, he's been buying those from the likes of Fandango, Apple's Movies, or Amazon Video. Mm-hmm. As we detailed a couple of weeks ago, bringing all those digital purchases into the Movies Anywhere interface has worked out quite well. And since he was able to redeem the codes that came with most of his Ultra HD Blu-ray discs, he also has duplicate versions of those in the Movies Anywhere now. Mm-hmm. Given the way things are going, he envisions that he will end up buying fewer and fewer physical discs every year and more Movies Anywhere versions. But if one day he does end up buying a Kaleidoscape or some other similar system, what's going to be the play at that point? Mm-hmm. Just make a hard break and have this dividing line in time where it's discs and Movies Anywhere before that point and then Kaleidoscape system after that point? Or do we think there will be a convenient way to merge it all together into a single interface where he can access everything? Do we think his current system is optimal? Any suggestions we would make on how he should purchase movies going forward? Man, why are you worried about this? I guess is my thing. Well, I know it's a fun mental exercise, but things could change. There could be a new product by the time you come around that is completely different. There could be something that has all this that interface. I still think you should start thinking about putting them all on a server someplace, because eventually one of these 175 discs is going to get scratched.
And we'll actually be getting to that next week, because Henry and I had a little email back and forth just last night, so I'm not prepared to put that onto this week's topic list, but we will be getting into some of that next week. And I'm in agreement there. Plus, he already owns that disc library, right? Like that's done. He owns the disc library. He will be adding to it, but I think what he's really getting at is is there going to be sort of this dividing line in time where there's the before library that he had and the after library that he had? And should he continue on with his current method of buying things now, or should he make the break now? That's, I'm inferring that a little bit from what he's asking. Right. But so here's the thing. I don't think you're ever going to really regret buying physical disc copies of movies that you really, really love and want to own. Even if at some point, several years from now, there's like a download only format, be that Kaleidoscape or something else that is even technically superior to Ultra HD Blu-rays. Like, I don't think you're ever going to get to, I really regret having bought those 4K Blu-rays. I don't see that as a downside. And you were already only buying the ones where you're like, this is a movie that I cherish and I want to own.
Sure.
There are other ones that like, hey, I like this movie. I don't mind having it, but it's not to the point that I'm going to buy the physical copy. I think you've already made that divide very well. So really, to me, the only question is those non-essential to you digital versions that you've bought. And there, to me, the thing that makes sense is buy as many of those as you can. Whenever that's what you're going to do is buy that movie digitally. Buy as many of those as you can from Apple Movies. Because I mean, out of all these, which is the company that I think is most likely to last the longest and not just ditch you and leave you in the lurch? And I could be wrong. Any of us could be wrong, but I think that that's most likely Apple, and they are integrated with Movies Anywhere, so there's not particularly a downside from making your purchases there and then bringing them into Movies Anywhere. Because if Movies Anywhere goes away, you still made the purchase originally on Apple Movies, and as long as Apple continues going with that, then those will still be there. So will you ever get to a situation where you can easily have a single interface that does all of it? And the answer there is going to be not without downloading and technically illegally downloading some of your movies, because yes, there are definitely ways that you could back up, and again, in the USA, technically illegally, back up your physical discs, and those could all be stored on something. But for the movies that you have purchased on Fandango at Home, on Movies Anywhere, on Amazon Prime, as far as morally, I don't feel particularly bad about downloading a movie that I have purchased from Apple so that I have a downloaded version of it. But legally speaking, that you're not supposed to do that. It's definitely not okay to just go downloading movies that you haven't actually bought anywhere. That's just morally and legally not okay. But if you've bought a movie and then you're like, but there is no way for me to download this movie, but I can get a torrent of it or whatever. It's like, morally, I don't feel too bad about that, but legally speaking, you can't do it. It's against the law, at least in the United States. So, but there is that possibility of, okay, you could have all of those movies on a hard drive and then use some type of playback system to do that. But then if you end up with a Kaleidoscape, it's like, that's locked down. That's completely locked down. And the only way you could have everything in Kaleidoscape is to rebuy everything in Kaleidoscape one way or another. So there definitely could be a dividing line if you ever get there. But I think your current plan is okay. I would just do the thing of, I'm going to prioritize Apple Movies. And then for the movies that you absolutely cherish, yes, buy those on disc. I don't think you'll ever regret that.
No, I don't think so either. Julian. A while back, Julian began a home renovation project, which included dismantling his old home theater and creating a new dedicated room. He's in the construction business, but that didn't prevent him from falling victim to scope creep. Mm-hmm. The size of the renovation kept growing, and before the new home theater was ever completed, he wound up tearing up his whole backyard and building a whole new patio. Yeah. But now that's done, and he's finally excited. Oh, he's excited to finally get his new theater up and running. Mm-hmm. Yay.
There is a room with some blue carpet and some gray walls painted, but in the photo, clearly holes have been cut for running wires and that, but in the photo, no equipment installed, home theater equipment installed just yet. The lighting is in, though.
So he already bought a 120-inch silver ticket fixed frame screen quite a while ago at this point, and he's finally ready to mount it. But he'd like to double check with us exactly how high above the floor we think the bottom edge of the screen should go. The ceiling is 8 feet high. The distance from eyes to screen is going to be 10.5 feet. Mm-hmm. There's just a single row of seats, and it's just a standard couch. He has measured, and his eyes end up seated height of about 42 inches from the floor. Mm-hmm. So what's going to be the optimal distance from the floor to the bottom of the screen? Okay. So I have lived with screens of varying heights, and I will tell you this whole our sort of rule of thumb of you want your eyes to be about a third of the way from the bottom of the screen is very true. Okay. The minute that you get, in my experience, above 42, not 42, in your case it would be 42 inches, but above a third, so that you are below that third mark, you really do feel like you're looking up. And it doesn't matter necessarily that you're reclined. It just always feels like you're looking up. Mm-hmm. And so having the screen your eyes be a third or a little bit higher than a third is, to me, optimal. Anything lower than that, and you're really risking this sort of, your screen looks high. Mm-hmm. And as somebody who's walking through a lot of houses right now, they are putting outlets for your TVs in almost every room of your house now, and they're on the wall, and they are so, I'm going to say a kind of baddish word, they're so damn high that I'm like, you have lost your mind. What are you guys thinking? This thing is almost on the ceiling. Like, why? What? I'd have to get the screen so big to make it low enough,
right,
to be usable. But these things are clearly meant to be like above a dresser or above a armoire or whatever. I don't know. I don't think armoires you can be above, but whatever. Be above a dresser or something like that. And it's stupid. So yes, a third of the, so whatever. Oh God, that Lee almost. Is she okay? Okay, that
Tom's
dog
looking out
just
his
like
window.
pulled her across the parking lot at like a light speed.
Dogs will do that.
So, anyway, so that's what I'm going to say.
Okay, yeah. So the height of your screen image, because you've already purchased and determined that with your 120-inch diagonal, the height of your screen image is more precisely 58.9 inches in screen height. We usually just round that to 59 inches when we're roughly talking about these things. But yeah, divide that by 3 and take 1/3 up from the bottom edge, and that's where it'll go. And if you do that, given where you said your eyes are going to be from the floor, that would place the bottom edge of the image. All right, so you still might have a frame, right? So this isn't necessarily to the what we don't know exactly what the thickness of the frame is, because Silver Ticket has like edgeless, and they also have ones that are up to 3 inches in terms of the thickness of the frame. But to the image itself, that'd be 22.5 inches. Would be where that would work out to make your eyes line up with the bottom third of the screen. And that's a pretty reasonable place to go. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that we do want to consider the resting eye line, which is typically not perfectly parallel to the floor. Right? If you especially have a recliner, then when you recline and you're back a little bit, your resting eye line can be at a slightly upward angle.
Right.
So that can mean that where your eyes just naturally rest, if that is matching 1/3 of the height of the screen, we would never have your resting eye line go above the midpoint of the screen. If you have the screen physically below that, then it's going to feel like the screen is way too low. So we're aiming for the zone between 1/3 of the screen's height up from the bottom to half of the screen's height up from the bottom. That's sort of the butter zone for our resting eye line to hit. So the absolute lowest, if your eye line was perfectly parallel to the floor and ceiling, and you hit the middle of the screen, then the bottom edge would only be 12.5 inches above the floor, which is probably too low. And then if we're using the THX guidelines of the top edge of the screen being not more than a 15-degree elevation angle, then the bottom edge of your screen would be 17 inches above the floor. But if we go for that 1/3 screen height, then we're at 22.5 inches above the floor. So I think we're, roughly speaking, looking at about 20 inches off the floor. That's going to feel pretty darn good, with a little bit of plus minus about 2.5 inches to either side of 20 inches above the floor. But then we're going to talk about his center speaker, and that's going to probably determine things for us.
Yeah. So his center speaker is a SVS Ultra Center that is 8.2 inches tall.
Yeah.
He's going to put it on a speaker stand below a screen. So is there a center speaker stand that we can recommend to him? He was thinking he might get the mono-price monolith 18-inch stand, but is that the right choice? Well, I mean, it will no longer be 20 inches off the ground. Your screen's going to have to be a little bit higher than that.
And that's just it. So this is where I would only use an 18-inch tall center speaker stand with the SVS Ultra Center, given its height that can't be altered. I would only do that if you are in a recliner and your resting eye line is at an upward angle. Because if all of that is true, then you could have the bottom of the screen, well, basically right in line with the top edge of that Ultra Center on top of an 18-inch tall stand, and that would be okay. But if your eye line is closer to parallel with the floor and ceiling, if it's not very much of an upward angle, that might feel a little bit high. So there are 12-inch tall stands out there. I know that sounds like really, really low, but when your center speaker is a tweeter above a mid-range design and is itself about 8.5 inches tall, you put that on top of a 12-inch tall stand, and then the bottom edge of your screen is just above that, and we're right in that zone that I was talking about, 21, 22 inches off the floor, and that's all going to feel very, very comfortable in my opinion. So I would likely look for a shorter than an 18-inch tall stand for your center speaker, unless you are definitely sitting in a reclining couch and your resting eye line is definitely at a noticeable upward angle versus parallel to the floor.
Yeah. So his front, left, and right speakers are a pair of SVS Prime Pinnacle floor standing speakers. He's got fairly thick carpet in his room, but he's also got a toddler. The footprint of the Prime Pinnacle speakers is kind of small. He's a bit concerned about the speakers potentially getting toppled over. He knows neither of us recommend spike feet for speakers, but can we offer a solution that would provide the maximum stability while also decoupling the speakers from the floor? If it's a thick carpet, I wouldn't worry too much about decoupling them. I would just take whatever feet there are on them off. If you are super worried about them toppling over, which, by the way, 3 boys.
Yep.
Okay.
Dogs as well. Tom's had lots of experience with doggos in the house.
I've had large and small animals in my house. And never has there been an instance where a speaker has toppled or even gotten close to topple.
Yeah.
Most of the time, the kids don't give a crap about the speakers. They will hang on to like the furniture,
Sure.
like when they're really little, like when they're pulling themselves up, that age, they will pull themselves up on the furniture that the TV is on, but they've never really, because speakers don't have anything to grab onto, really.
Right.
So it's, to me, it's never been a problem. So I would not worry about it. But if you're really worried about it, you could take a piece of plywood or a piece of wood, stain it black or paint it black or whatever you're going to do to it. And then there are threaded holes in the bottom of your speaker for the feet. Just make it wider until it's wide enough that you're not worried about it toppling over anymore, just to give it a wider base.
Yeah.
And then drill some holes through it in the right places, put the screws through to that anchor it to the bottom of the speaker, and Bob's your uncle. You're done.
You're
no
adding
spikes.
adding your own plinth, no spikes. And if someone is like, hey, wait a second, you're adding a bigger bottom to a speaker, aren't you worried that you're going to have to put squishy feet on the bottom of that and to couple it? We have just increased the number of square inches. Pounds per square inch is what we're talking about. Downward force, pounds per square inch pressure. We've just increased the number of square inches. That means we have, as a number, decreased the number of pounds per square inch because we have more square inches. We've actually done a better job of damping that connection by adding a wider base plinth to the bottom of the speaker. No spike feet involved, no penetrating the carpet and carpet pad. Just furthermore to all of that, this doesn't look like an enormous room. Putting a 120-inch screen in here, those speakers are going to be not super far from any of these walls. They're not going to be super far away from the front wall. They're not going to be super far away from the side walls. So that further to me says the chances of your toddler is not going to brace their back against the wall and push against the side of the speaker. Toddlers don't behave like that. That's going to be a little bit strange. So yeah, I agree with Tom. I am not the least bit concerned about it. And I agree, if you're going to do anything, just give it a wider base.
That's right. This question is from John or maybe Adam. We don't know what name he prefers.
Yeah,
I've
said multiple times, I'm like, just let me know what you'd like to be called. I am happy to call you any name. It doesn't have to be John or Adam. It could be anything you want.
It could be John Adams.
I will
Maybe he was a president.
But just let me know because I remain confused.
All right, whatever. All right, John Adams. He's currently using an Outlaw Audio Model 976 Prepo. That's a discontinued model at this point. It tops out at 7.2 channels with both RCA and XLR pre-outs and HDMI 2.0. It doesn't have any automated room correction, but there is a manual 10-band parametric EQ for each channel. He's looking to increase the number of speakers and support Atmos and DTS-X. He's currently using a Crown 1002 monoblock amp to power his center and two Crown 1502 stereo amps to power his fronts and surrounds. So he's only got 5.0. Is that 5.1?
At the moment, five speaker setup.
But he has additional amps on hand already, and his Apple TV 4K is his primary source device. Since he prefers to keep price points under control, he's considered, and he bought pre-pro and amps.
No, I mean, it was Outlaw, so he wasn't going for the most expensive.
It wasn't going out, but he still could have gotten cheaper or receiver. Anyways, since he prefers to keep price points under control, he's considering the Tone Winner AT300 Pre-Pro as a potential replacement. It's available in the USA from Summit Hi-Fi at a price about $13.75. And while it's listed as a 16-channel Pre-Pro, Tone Winner clearly describes it as supporting up to 13 speakers because of all the subs, which they also count.
That's right.
Not 15. And it also has a single XLR subwoofer pre-out plus 2 RCA subwoofer pre-outs, and those can all be active at the same time. So you can either do a 7.3.6 or a 9.3.4 configuration with the AT300. Since the OEM is J Designs, which is the same thing as the same company that does Emotiva, and it's based on the same internals as the Emotiva MC1 13.2 channel pre-pro. The Tone Winner AT300 does come with basic automatic room correction. They can't call it EMO-Q, but it's essentially the same thing. It also provides a manual PQ or parametric EQ for each channel, but the number of bands is different for the different channels. 11 for the front 3, 7 bands for the other speaker channels, and only 5 bands for the sub channel, which applies to all 3 subwoofer pre-outs together in mono. The HDMI ports are 2.0, not 2.1, but it does support eARC. So what do we think? Is this a good upgrade solution for him? I don't even know why people ask us this question anymore. And this is no shade at John Adams here. This is no shade at all. Okay, but I feel like they really, really, really want us to say, yes, this is the exact right pre-pro for you, and not say you should buy a receiver. Because that's what we're going to say, and we say it almost every single time. Like, it's so rare that we're like, oh, yeah, you know what? A pre-pro is the perfect solution for you. Dude, how big is your room? Is it an auditorium? No? Okay, get a receiver. It's just every single time we're going to say this. The price point, especially now that who knows what's going to happen with Denon and Rant and Onkyo and all these other things. Just grab a receiver before they become either obsolete, extinct, or the tariffs turn them into luxury items that only the ultra rich can afford. Anyways, he says, what do we think? Is this a good upgrade solution for him? There doesn't seem to be anything else out there that can go beyond 11 speakers, except for every receiver on the market.
No, not beyond 11
this price
speakers.
Point. At this price point, yes, they can. But how is it in terms of, well, for accessories for us, they can. But how is it in terms of bugs and glitches, day-to-day use, and support for all the latest video formats like Dolby Vision HDR10? Is there anything else that only costs a little bit more that would be far better experience for him? It's a receiver. The answer is always a receiver.
Yeah, no, to go beyond 11, which gives you, either 6 overhead speakers with 7 floor-level speakers, or front wides plus 4 overhead speakers.
The real answer. The real answer is, how many speakers are you You keep talking about the number of speakers that can support.
Yeah.
But you are currently living with a 5-point something system. Okay. So that indicates to me that while you could, and I swear to you, do not do this, you could shoehorn 13 or 18 or 120 speakers into your room. What's gonna sound best? And if your room really is not that much bigger than what a 5-point system will support, then we're really looking at a maximum of 9, right? Really,
it could be
objectively to get almost all of the sound and all of the goodness. After you get past 9, which is 5 floor levels, 2 overheads, then you are everything else. 4 overheads. Sorry. Then you are really not getting any benefit other than just the satisfaction of knowing that you have more speakers than everybody else.
This might be all about front wides. Worse. Might be all about front wides because you do need to get to the models that go beyond 11 speakers to get any front wide support. And if that's the case, if this is all about getting front wide support, then I have a really tough time highly recommending the AT300. The AT300 does support a configuration that includes front wides, but the only time those front wide speakers with a Tone Winner AT300 will ever make a single peep is with a dedicated Dolby Atmos soundtrack that happens to put some audio objects into the front wide positions. Because the limitation with this one is it does not use the version of the Dolby Surround Up mixer that puts any sounds into the front wides. So whenever you're using the Dolby Surround Up mixer, which with the AT300, the Dolby Surround Up mixer can only be applied to Dolby signals. There is no cross-pollination of up mixers in this processor. So Dolby Digital Plus, Dolby True HD, Those are all going to be upmixed by the Dolby Surround upmixer in this, and it will never put any sounds into the front wide speakers. Over on the DTS side, it will never use the front wide speakers for anything DTS because this does not have DTS X Pro. It stops at 11 speakers, DTS X version of it. It does not expand to DTS X Pro, and it's not going to put any sound in the front wide speakers. So it is exceedingly limited the number of times any sounds are going to come out of the front wide speakers if you get a Tone Winner AT300. Beyond that, its HDMI is limited. It does not support HDR10 Plus. It does support Dolby Vision and regular HDR10, but not 10 Plus. So yeah, I just really struggle to fully recommend this when the idea is, I want to go beyond 11 speakers. And I would have to guess that the reason you're wanting to do that is for front wide support. So all of that leads me to, is there something anywhere close to $1375? Because that is definitely the lowest price for anything that goes beyond 11 speakers by quite a margin. But what you would be looking at is accessories for less. You'd want to go certified refurbished for sure to get the price down. And you wouldn't be able to get terribly close with a Denon X6800H. That's going to be about $2,500 or more. So that's a sizable gap in price there. But if you go back to the X6700H, which is still available for accessories for less, it is $1,900. That is not nothing from $1,375, but it is as close as you can get. And the huge advantage here is you get a whole bunch of things that you'd have to be looking for when you're looking for a 13-channel type of processing.
So you're only assuming that he wants front wides, though,
well,
right?
Yeah, because why else do you want to go beyond 11?
I think the reason he wants to go by, I think he wants us to recommend this product. He wants that product.
Sure.
And that product is the cheapest product that will give him all these speakers.
That's
he
right.
wants us to recommend a product that he already wants to buy.
And if you're okay with all the
bought.
limitations that I just mentioned, it's just that's what you have to be aware of, is that it does have limitations.
But if you're not specifically going for front wides, if you're just like, I just want to have the ability to put as many speakers, and maybe someday I'll have this, and blah blah blah. You can get a receiver that does a lot more speakers than you're currently running.
Sure.
For a lot less.
You can definitely do 11. 11 is no problem. Yeah.
With an AV receiver that and then still connected up to your amps if you really wanted to. But I'm guessing this room is so small you don't even need the amps anyways.
Yeah.
And that's because I read forward into this next question, and that just makes me think that I'm right and you're wrong.
The X6700H, does all the various versions of HDR. It does have the 6700H has a single HDMI 2.1 input, so that is a limitation. But there is at least a single HDMI 2.1 input as opposed to zero HDMI 2.1 inputs. And then of course you've got Odyssey Multi-Q XT32 that's built into it, not just a manual parametric EQ system that only has 5 bands of EQ for the subwoofer, which I think is verging on not enough. I would rather have 11 for the subwoofer and 5 for the speakers if I had to have my druthers as far as the number of parametric EQ bands. So I mean, all those advantages there. You've got just the stability and the HDMI switching stability of Denon versus the glitches that we know has happened with all of the former Jade Designs implementations of HDMI boards. So just overall, it does cost more, but then also consider you've already got 5 amplifiers, or in fact even more on hand. And then if you were going to have to add any more amplifiers to get all the way up to 13 speakers with the Tone Winner, it's like, no, there's amplification already built into the X6700H. So you can justify the difference in price that way.
Yeah. All right. His current TV is a 55-inch TCL R635 series, and he's looking to upgrade that as well. He wants to go up to a 65-inch screen size, and he's looking to keep the price at $1,000 or less. If you're sitting in a room with a 55-inch TV and you're like, I gotta go bigger, I'm going all the way to 65.
We don't know for sure this is the same setup. It's possible the TV's in a different room. I don't know that for sure.
That is true. Yeah. That is true. But if this is the same room,
right,
there's no world in which you need to have front wides or a bunch of extra speakers on your ceiling, as far as I'm concerned, or surround backs. He wants to buy the TV from Amazon. In addition to the screen size increase, he wants a noticeable step up in image quality parameters. He says a 30% increase. I don't know any idea how we could give you a 30% increase.
I had wonderful flashbacks to My Little Pony, because that was Rainbow Dash's thing. It needs to be about 20% cooler.
Anyways, he's taken a look at Amazon's listings, and it would seem that either last year's TCL QM751 or QM851 could be options, but Then there are this year's QM6K and 7K, and the new 8K is too expensive. And there's also Roku Pro Series QLED that fits the budgets. What we say would be his best choice. I don't know, Rob. You tell him. I got to go to the bathroom.
So to me, this one is easy. If we're looking at the 65-inch options that are under $1,000, that TCL QM851G, that was the 2024 flagship, has now been replaced by the QM8K here in 2025. But the QM851G is just the easy choice here. It's on Amazon right now for $900 on clearance. And all of the other ones are a step down. It's as simple as that. If you want the greatest visible difference between the R635 that you already have, which, by the way, was a really good TV. I really, really feel like the R635 back when it came out punched way above its weight. It's sort of the one that really, really put TCL on the map as being like, hey, they can fight with the flagship TVs from the major brands, more established brands back then than TCL, which was still a little bit of an upstart and a disruptor. So that's the one that really kind of put them on the map, and it's a great TV. So to get I can definitely see the difference. Yeah, you want to go as high up in the lineup as you can, and that's the QM851. So that's almost surely the choice there. The only thing I will mention is that it is possible to get a Samsung S90D, which is a quantum dot OLED. That is from 2024. It has now been replaced by the S90F in 2025. But the 2024 model, the S90D in the 65-inch size, is available for $1,300. So, yes, that has clearly gone over the $1,000 budget, but it is definitely the least expensive of the flagship level OLEDs in the 65-inch size. The S90D had the flagship level quantum dot OLED panel in it, same as the S95D back then, but the S95D had a matte screen surface, which I flat out didn't like myself, because if you have any lights on in the room, those wonderful OLED inky blacks turn gray. So I was like, ugh, I don't like that. And then it had the one Connect box and a slimmer bezel design. So the S90D was definitely the value choice. So if that budget can go up to $1,300, I would definitely look at that Samsung S90D quantum dot OLED, because as good as your R635 is, it doesn't meet the inky black levels of an OLED, and it doesn't have the color volume of a quantum dot OLED in particular. But if $1,000 is a hard line and you cannot go above that, then the TCL QM851G is an easy choice. All right, let's move on to Chris. Chris has moved house. He was able to buy a house a couple of months ago, so that means a whole new home theater setup. He's like, don't judge anything too harshly just yet. I'm going to put a picture up on screen that he sent in. It's still a work in progress for sure, but he sent just a few photos to help us get an idea of the room that he is working with, and as we can see, it is a living room. It's got a large permanent opening over on what is the right-hand side, the way he has oriented things, and then there's also an opening to the stairway that's going upstairs in what is the front left corner of this living room setup, the way that he has oriented things. So there is no dedicated enclosed rectangle of a room in this house, unfortunately, but he's still happy to have a place to set up a new surround sound setup. So going through the photos here, Tom is back and he can take over.
I am back. Sorry about that, guys and gals. Yes, and for all of you who are like, oh, well, not all of us can be so special as to have dedicated home theaters. I'm about to be not so special as to have a dedicated home theater. The chances of us finding a house that I will be able to set up a dedicated home theater in is almost nil.
And I don't mind this room. This looks like a nice room to set up. You got a 3-seater couch that's directly facing the TV, another recliner to its right, and then a love seat that's in front of the windows that are on the left wall. This looks like a nice place to sit down and watch a movie.
Yeah. So given where the openings are, he doesn't want to run any wires from the AV receiver below his TV to his surround speakers or to his subwoofer, which is positioned in the rear left corner. To try out a wireless solution, he got a wireless 2-channel kit from a brand called One Me.
Yeah. A lot of these companies are loving the double II for some reason. So
in bike parts, there's lots of stuff on Amazon that is knockoff stuff. And we've tried some of it at the shop, and it's been mostly, I would like to say it's been hit or miss, but it's mostly just been miss.
Nah.
We've gotten a couple that have worked, but for the most part they don't, and they all have names that just looks like somebody slammed their face against a keyboard.
At least this one isn't quite that bad. This is like it seems like a chosen name, not just a random scramble of letters. But yeah, the one me or the my or however they want to pronounce it.
MII. So, anyways, this is off of Amazon for $60. He plugged his receiver subwoofer pre-out into the transmitter and plugged the subwoofer's RCA cables into the receiver unit, and it works perfectly.
Yeah.
So that's giving him hope that he will also be able to wirelessly connect pair surround speakers. He already owns a 2-channel Fosse V3 amp, and he's fine with having the amp behind his couch with wires running to the left and right surround speakers from there. So could he just get a second one of these Me wireless kits, exact same model as the one he got for a subwoofer, or would that result in interference or some other problem with his setup? He knows we've recommended the Anthony wireless speaker kits in the past. Would that be a better choice? The Anthony model 1700 is reasonably priced at $100, but it's a single amplifier module and is only rated to output 40 watts by 2. Which is probably more than enough, but whatever. The $200 Anthony Model 1800 provides 2 physically separate 80-watt monoblock amps, and it's kind of more than he'd like to spend, but if it's totally worth it, he's willing, so what do we say? I mean, I would just get if you've already got the amp, I would just get a transmitter. The problem here, like you've correctly identified, is you need to worry about interference and whether or not these things can be operated simultaneously.
Yeah, the One Me is all on the 2.4 gigahertz band. It doesn't have different frequency bands that it can change to, like a 5.8 or a 5. What is the other one that's normally used? 4? 2? Whatever it is.
I think it's 5.4.
So this is all 2.4. Now, they do actually mention that one that you got, the $60 one, the One Me one that you bought, they're like, those come as a prepared package, 1 transmitter, 1 receiver, and there is no ability to add additional receivers to it. Like if you wanted 1 transmitter to send to multiple receiver units. In the one that you bought, that particular model, they're prepared out of the box. Those are the only ones that they're paired with. There's no like additional pairing procedure, and you can't add more receivers to it. So that gives some hope that maybe it would avoid interference, but at the same time, if all of their units are using the exact same frequency, then they are going to interfere with one another, and there's no real way for us to completely know assuredly beforehand without giving it a try.
This is a read the reviews situation. So you would go onto the Amazon reviews, because that's where you got it anyways, and you would just start searching through the reviews to see if somebody must have bought 2 of them.
Yeah. But
somebody must have.
The other thing I'm a little concerned with is I looked back through some of the previous messages that Chris has sent, and I believe he has an S-series Denon receiver, which does not have pre-outs for the surround speakers. And that One Me definitely would require you to have pre-outs for your surround speakers, because it is just red and white RCA plugs, so you've got to have surround speaker pre-outs. So if I'm correct about that, then you would be better off getting one of the Anthony models, because the Anthony transmitter, that you plug your receiver's output into to transmit the signal wirelessly to your surround speakers, it has speaker wire inputs on the Anthony. That's one of the reasons we love the Anthony wireless transmitters, because you do not have to have pre-outs for all of your speakers. You can just use the regular speaker wire binding post connections. And if that is the situation you're in, if you do not have pre-outs for your surround speakers, you're going to need to go this way. And it will be more cost effective to do this than to try and do some kind of speaker wire to RCA adapter that then goes into a One Me that then feeds, it's so many connections and adapters, you might as well get the Anthony. Now, looking at your setup and where your surround speakers are positioned relative to your seats, you don't need more than 40 watts a channel. That you're going to be absolutely fine with 40 watts a channel, given the minimal distances that you're away from your surround speakers in this setup. So the Model 1700 at $100, that'd be the way I would go in here. So yeah, I think that settles that.
Let's see here. Ryan. Ryan's basement theater space is not an enclosed rectangle. Perhaps the easiest way to understand what he's dealing with would be to picture a very long rectangular room, but then carve a sizable chunk out of that rectangle for a bathroom. So on one end, there's a theater area with a projection set up, and then the back of the theater area is where the bathroom and a wide hallway beside the bathroom begins. And then on the other end of that bathroom plus wide hallway, there's another TV area, smaller than the theater area. So there's like 2 TV areas that are facing away from each other.
Yeah.
Okay, in a rectangle, right on the short walls of the rectangle, the 2 TV areas. One's got a projection screen and one's got a TV.
Yeah.
And then in between, there's a bathroom.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
It's almost like a Jack and Jill, except that the rooms are connected.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's, almost like a weird, uneven U shape overall. But yeah, if you just picture a long rectangle and then it's like, oh, there's this other rectangle within it for the bathroom, taking a chunk out of it, sort of in the middle. That's what's going on here.
Yeah. So there's 2 subwoofers are on either side wall of the theater area. Which theater area? I guess
the projection
projector.
Theater area.
Yeah.
That's what's
just behind the
designated as
couch. That faces the projection screen. The past couple of weeks, we covered our methods of connecting and setting up dual subwoofers, but that threw him for a loop a bit. He has done his own research before that, including calling SVS and talking to them and asking around the SVS Facebook group. That's not going to get you anything. No offense.
We are unfortunately a little bit out on an island, but we also happen to know we're right. So that's the problem.
So bad.
We can't just kind of get along to get along because we're like, unfortunately, we're right and they're wrong.
The reason why we are so confident in our rightness, other than all the personal experience and all the reports from people who have done what we said and said, oh my God, I can't believe it worked, is because when new data comes out, we're like, oh, yeah, let's modify what we're recommending slightly because, we have this new data. Or, oh, see?
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, so, right. Don't go to Reddit. Basically.
He didn't. He went to a Facebook group, but,
it's
same
the
difference.
Same thing.
Same difference. Yeah.
Anyways, he's using a Denison X4500 receiver, and everyone told him to just plug in one of the subwoofers in the sub out, and then plug a second sub in sub out 2. So the sub out 1, sub out 2. Physically speaking, those 2 subwoofers are equidistant from the middle couch seat.
Yeah.
So what does that got to do with anything?
Well,
unless your seat is 60 feet away.
They're saying when you're setting the distance settings, if you did it by a tape measure, those would be equal. Yeah.
Right. So SVS said it really wouldn't matter how he plugged in his 2 subwoofers into his den, since they end up both getting the same mono signal no matter what.
Unfortunately, that's incorrect. Yeah.
Yeah. So can we explain, for his particular setup, why he should still set his den to say he only has 1 subwoofer and then use a Y splitter? Or is SVS correct on this in his particular setup? It doesn't honestly matter. So, yeah. So in the Denon, if I remember correctly, the 4500, it has independent subwoofer outputs.
That one does have multi-Q XT32 with sub EQ HT, which gives you independent level and distance settings for the 2 subwoofers, but then it equalizes them together in mono. It does not give them individual equalization settings, but it does give them independent distance and level settings. And I totally get the logic of physically, I measure it with a tape measure. You measure it with a tape measure, and my 2 subwoofers are the same distance from microphone position number 1, my middle primary seat. So why should it matter if I plug my 2 subwoofers into the 2 subwoofer preouts, the 2 independent subwoofer preouts, even though they're independent? You measure with a tape measure, they're the same distance from mic position number 1. It's going to set them to the same distance. That's going to be exactly the same as if I'd used a Y splitter. So it shouldn't matter. Logically, it shouldn't matter.
So when you do this, because you've done it already. So let's look at your settings right now. Let's go to look at our settings, and let's take the tape measure from your seat to your sub. Either one, doesn't matter because they're the same.
Because they're the same.
Right? And then compare what you read on the tape measure to what you see on the screen.
Yeah.
And tell me if they are the same. So if they are the same, first of all, I'll eat my hat, of which I don't have one on right now. But second, you will see that those it is not the same. It is much different. The subwoofer is actually being many feet further away than it is in real life.
We don't actually know that for 100% sure because we haven't seen his readouts, but we know from personal experience, very often the distance setting after you've run Odyssey for your subwoofers in particular, for your speakers, it's almost always bang on. It's the same as the tape measure, tape measure reading for the speakers. But for the subwoofers, it can vary quite a bit. And even if your two subwoofers are physically equidistant from mic position number 1, that is not what gets said in Odyssey. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. That's, as far as the way Odyssey is measuring. What's at play here is Odyssey is just detecting. It knows, here's when I sent out the Odyssey test tone chirp, right? When you're doing your whole Odyssey setup, you're going to hear the weep, 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 weep from each of your speakers. And when it gets to each sub, it's going to individually have them go womp, 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 womp. And it knows.
It's very close, by the way.
Yeah, I know what it sounds like. I've done Odyssey.
We've done it a couple of times in this.
And so it knows exactly when it sent that signal out electrically, because in Odyssey, the microphone is plugged straight into the AV receiver and there's no option to do it another way. Well, there's technically a pro way, but we won't get into that because it has nothing to do with this. That measurement microphone is plugged straight in the receiver and it knows electrically exactly when it sent out that speaker. And then it is just listening with that microphone and timing how long it takes for that sound to reach the microphone. But there is a big, big difference between high-frequency sounds and low-frequency sounds. Right. With the high-frequency sound from any of your speakers, it can measure very accurately exactly how long it took for the sound to go in a straight line from any of your speakers right to the tip of that microphone, and it nails that pretty darn well. But for a bass, because the bass frequencies are very often, the wavelength itself is longer than one of the dimensions of your room. Very often the height of your room, right? Most rooms are 8 feet or 9 feet high, and very often that's the limiting factor. But what it means is that the microphone is never actually receiving just the straight line sound from either subwoofer to the tip of the microphone. It is, by the virtue of it being long wavelengths of sound, getting reflected sound as well. And for that reason, it's like, oh, this sound arrived at a different number of milliseconds than just the physical distance it would take sound to travel from the subwoofer to the tip of the microphone. And that's why you end up with different readings, or readings that are different from the tape measure. And that explains why we say to always use a Y-splitter or a daisy chain connection. But in other words, my receiver has been set to say it has one subwoofer, not two, and I use one of the sub pre-outs, and that very same mono signal gets fed to both subwoofers. Why do we say to do that? It is because in Odyssey, it's going to give you those independent distance settings and independent level settings for that matter. And it does that first. And that is now locked in Odyssey. You can't change it at that moment, because then it goes on to play both of the subwoofers together simultaneously, but with different distance and level settings that it already set, and you cannot change at that moment. And then it plays them together and it equalizes them as a unit together. So if you then discover, oh, you know what, it turns out, based on this timing thing that it did to set those distances, that's not actually the optimal setting for the phase relationship between my two subs and my seats. It would be better for the two subs for me to use the fully variable phase knob on the back of my subwoofers and set it manually to get that nice uniform response across my 3-seater couch. You can't go back in and manually adjust the independent distances in Odyssey, because if you do that, it alters what the equalization should have been. And so what Odyssey needs to implement is a gap. A gap between it having set the distances and levels, and before it does the equalization, that's when it needs to let you change those settings manually, so that you could say, oh, it turns out I really should alter that distance setting to actually achieve uniform bass, and then go ahead and equalize. But there is no option to do that. It will always set the distances itself, go ahead and equalize, and then if you manually change the distances afterwards, you would have to re-equalize, but if you do Odyssey again, it's going to reset the distances because there's no way to turn that part of it off. So that's the problem. We say manually get your phase alignment done, Now we know we have uniform base across our seats. The only way to retain that is to say, I only have one subwoofer, and now Odyssey, go ahead and equalize it. That's the explanation.
There you go. So he can get nice sounding bass at his main seat in his couch, but if a movie is playing and he walks into that wide hallway at the back, it's not that wide of a hallway, but
well, I mean, it's
really.
wider than just a typical hallway because it's like 6 feet across.
Or goes into the TV room at the far end. It's very obvious that a lot of sound, bass in particular, is making its way into those open areas and really messing up the acoustics and audio in there. Who's in there? Watching the movie through the wall that they can't get, you know what I mean? So is there some sort of non-permanent way to block off that hallway opening? Yeah, it's called a door, except it's permanent, and you can't, that's it.
That's the caveat, yeah.
Obviously, he'd still need to be able to get in and out of the theater area, but he'd also want the option to completely remove the barrier at any time. Could some freestanding bass traps, nope, going across the hallway opening do the trick, or would they need to be so thick as to be unmanageable or to ever move out of the way and then place back? Yeah, you would need a wall. I mean, basically, even then it would still get out. At least some of it would.
No, but I mean that would definitely change the acoustics if you constructed a wall with a door, right? So, and this doesn't have to be a load-bearing wall, obviously. So this is a regular stick frame wall with a regular door in it. There's still going to be some sound that gets in there. This isn't a fully soundproof solution, but it definitely will change the acoustics. You're going to have the majority of those bass sound waves reflect off of the new wall with the door closed, and you're not going to have this resonance that's happening in that hallway and the TV room at the other end.
Right. So, but if you're thinking you're going to be able to put a curtain, which I think is where most people go with this, or a, like a freestanding 4 foot by 2 foot by maybe 4 inch thick panel that you can just put up there and it'll somehow funnel all the sound that's in the room into itself before it goes past and into that hallway, which is not how sound works at all.
No.
Think of it and we've said this before, think of it like water, right? Like, how would you stop water from getting out of this room?
Right.
Because that's what sound is like. Mm-hmm. So if you think that there's a curtain or a panel or a something that can stop the water from going into if you could fill up this room with water and it would stop it going past, what would stop it going past? Mm-hmm. And it would be a wall with a door that had seals around it to stop the water from getting out. That's what you would need. And that's what you would need for the sound too. So first of all, who gives a crap what the sound sounds like back there? Because
I don't know. I mean, he brought it up, so apparently it's an issue.
Well, that's what I'm saying to you. I'm like, if you're just noticing it and be like, oh, that sounds kind of bad back here, well, you should do something about this. Don't go back there anymore. While you're watching a movie, you just press pause. Like, oh, I'm coming back from the bathroom. This sounds bad while I'm coming back from the bathroom. Press pause when you go to the bathroom. Don't ever make sound happen when you're doing that, because it's never going to sound good. There's no way of making it sound good. The whole point is to make it sound good in the seats that you're at, not to make it sound good in seats that you're not at or places in the room where you're not watching the movie.
Yeah.
If it is the case that you don't want the sound to get on the other part of this room, you do have to construct a door. There is no way around it.
I mean, that's
it
the
has
real
to be
way.
Permanent.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll mention this is not as good as constructing a wall with a door, but this is more than nothing. Is, over at a company like Acoustical Solutions, they do have their privacy shield. This is a blanket soundproofing barrier. Now, this is basically 2 inches of fiberglass insulation on the other side of a mass-loaded vinyl, limp vinyl layer. This is 4 feet wide by 8 feet tall, so this is a big thing. It has Velcro along its vertical edges so that you can stick together more than one of these, and you would probably need to because it looks like it's a 6 foot wide opening. And you would also then want some method of essentially mounting Velcro strips on your walls and ideally your floor and ceiling as well, so that you can really do as close to an airtight seal all the way around this barrier. And if you need 2 of these, you're looking at $850 before shipping. I'll bet you can put up a little party wall for less than that, if we're being honest.
Yes, you can. And not only that, the fact that this thing is 8 feet tall, let me explain something to you about your room. Mm-hmm. Yes, the ceilings are 8 feet tall. You know what they did not take into consideration? The carpet that's in there when they did that, because I had 8 feet I had 2 4-foot tall tri-traps
Yeah.
that I tried to put into my house, which had 8-foot ceilings, and they did not fit. And it's because
this
the
is
carpet
basement
and
with a
everything
hard floor, so that might not be the thing. And honestly,
It
with,
might not.
with-
But I just don't be surprised
with the
if
sound
it's not
barrier,
exactly 8 feet.
it does have some flexibility. So, I mean, if we're talking about here is something that can be removed, that can be like just pushed out of the way. You'd have to detach the Velcro and push it out of the way to make an opening for yourself to get in and out of the theater. But here is a non-permanent, not building a wall solution that does definitely more than anything else you might be imagining, like a thick drape or bass traps, which will not block the sound. This will block sound, especially if you fully Velcro seal it all the way around.
Right.
Not as good as a wall and a door, but more than absolutely nothing. But yeah, it's a $850 before shipping solution. The shipping is not cheap because this is really, really heavy. You can at least get it in a few different colors, but there you go. I've answered the question that there is a way to do it, but it's not ideal.
He asks, how many decibels does Odyssey Dynamic EQ add to the bass anyhow? Is it like 4 or 5 dB? He asks because he confirmed that the trim levels for all the speakers resulted in the readings of 75 dB for all of them in his main seat, and that seems perfectly fine. But everyone in the Facebook home theater group says you should subwoofer trim level should be set like higher, like 85 dB. But Odyssey didn't do that. It sets a sub to 75 dB as well, just like all his other speakers. But is the Facebook group recommendations taking dynamic EQ into account? Because he's never listened at full reference volume and he has dynamic EQ turned on. But then he's also thinking he likes some additional bass punch. So he's trying to figure out where he ought to set a subwoofer trim level to achieve the right balance. What are they talking about?
They're talking about jacking up the trim level on their subwoofer. I mean, that's an age-old
adding
advice.
10 dB you can do, but why would you do that? What you really should be doing is looking at the Odyssey Editor app.
Yes.
And making a custom curve
yes.
for yourself that you can adjust pretty much on the fly, and then just listen. We've talked about bass you can feel. We've talked about where that kick you in the chest bass is,
which is between 40 and 60 hertz. It's not as low as people imagine it to be,
and it's not in a trim level someplace either.
Yeah, the boosting the trim level is a imprecise bludgeoning sort of way of giving yourself more bass. I mean, just picture this, right? As soon as you get to that transition between the bottom end of your speakers and the top end of your sub, it suddenly jumps 10 dB if this is the way that you do it, which is very noticeable and sometimes startling and not at all subtle. And that is not a great way to do this. It's simple. It's a dead simple settings change to make, and that's why that unfortunate advice has persisted, but it's definitely not the way we would recommend doing it. So first and foremost, we want you to get your dual subwoofer setup in order, because it sounds like you've been using the two separate pre-outs. So we want uniform bass. That is the beginning to all of this. That is the foundation to all of this, is I have achieved uniform bass across my 3 seats. Now you can run Odyssey via the Odyssey Editor app, and that only costs, I still haven't looked it up, I should, but it's $20 or $25. It's not an exorbitant amount of money. It's in that price range, $20 or $25. You do need to begin the Odyssey process in the Odyssey Editor app. You have probably run it directly from the built-in version of your AV receiver. You cannot reuse that. You have to begin the process in the Odyssey Editor app. But once you have done that and taken your measurements from the Odyssey Editor app, then you can make manual changes to the Odyssey target curve anytime you want in the Editor app and re-upload those new settings to your AV receiver without having to measure all over again. And this is where we have no problem with a gentle sloping rise in the bass, because Odyssey doesn't target that. They target a perfectly flat line. But the general advice, this is according to Harman and Todd Welty and Sean Olive and Floyd Toole and well-known installers like Anthony Gramani and people like that, we're talking 1 decibel per octave. So this is not a huge scooping swoop up in the bass, but it is a gentle tilt upward in the bass. And we have no problem with that, even when dynamic EQ is going to be turned on. That is generally a good thing. And that is not the default, so you can put that in. And then if you just I really like an extra kick in the chest, give yourself a little 3 decibel hump that is centered on 50 hertz. and then, you know, a little hill between 40 and 60 hertz, centered on 50 hertz. And that's going to be a really nice little extra oomph kick in the chest in that area where that really happens, that tactile sensation. And that is almost certainly going to work perfectly well for you with dynamic EQ still active. Because with the Facebook group advice is really old advice. It's, you know, taking a sledgehammer to a pin nail, and it's not the way to do things.
So the other thing to think about, because what you mentioned here is like, oh, well, when I run Odyssey, it sets my subwoofers to 75 dB. Well, they don't have to. You know, the default for Odyssey doesn't have to be 75 dB. It could be 85 dB. It could be 65 dB. It could be a lot of things. Okay, it doesn't make any difference because what they're doing is just saying, I'm sending out a signal.
Yes. And
that signal is supposed to be played this loud. How loud is the microphone actually recording it?
Relative to full scale, that is supposed to measure at 75 dB for all of them, including the subwoofer. That's what the signal coming out during the Odyssey test tones is referenced to.
But that's immaterial. They could have chose any random number to do this with. But why they pick 75 dB? Because it's loud enough to play over the top of other noises, extraneous noises. It's not so soft that other things could be conflated with it, and it's not so loud as to make it uncomfortable for anybody that's in the room. Yeah. You know, I mean, they could make it 105. They could make it 120. If they really wanted to, especially for some.
I don't know. The microphone might give out at 120. That might be clipping.
But in theory, they could.
Yeah, right.
And, you know, so the point here of that, 75 dB seems low, and everybody else says it should be 85 dB.
Oh, no, that's just everybody else saying we like more bass, which is not surprising, and then saying I just jack it up by 10 dB, but it's like it's very unsubtle and not at all blending nicely. No, use the Odyssey editor app.
Yeah, you use the editor app, and then you can change it on the fly to 4 different frequencies, too. He says, have either of us ever tried using the Odyssey 1 program that was made by Obsessive Compulsive Audiophile on YouTube? I have not, and I have no intention of, but go on. It involves taking your save file from Odyssey, importing it into RummyQ Wizard, running the Odyssey 1 script on it, and then re-uploading the newly modified Odyssey save files back into your AV receiver. He gave it a try. He wasn't sure if his results were typical. He made his front 3 speakers a couple of dB louder than the rest of his speakers and modified all the distance settings. So he's just curious if we have any thoughts on that. I am uninterested in somebody's, you know, basically creating a program that they think makes things sound better, and then I have to therefore think it sounds better too. I'm fine with having Odyssey go, this is as flat as we can make it. Do what you want with it with our editor app, and then I do it to what my preferences are, not some rando online. And that's why we've never given out, and nor will we ever give out a curve that we think is the best curve.
Well, it's because we have very good evidence at this point that it is basically unique to your setup. The ideal target curve is essentially unique to your setup, so there is no one size fits all. Although there's, you know, relatively decent starting points with mild tweaks from there, and that's more or less what you're getting here with the Odyssey 1 program. So I don't actually utilize it myself, but I also have no beef with it. On the one thing, it's going to get you to use the Odyssey editor app, which we already recommended. So, hey, and also it's a non-destructive process. You can use it as many times. It gives you a choice of different target curves to use within Odyssey 1. So I have no problem with this because you can play with it. It's non-destructive. You can always get back to baseline. And so if you just want to have some fun experimenting with it, I say by all means go for it. I've got no problem utilizing it whatsoever. It gives you a choice of different predetermined target curves. So, and that's what it's doing for you. Instead of you having to move your finger on a touch screen and draw your own target curve, it's like, here's a selection. And it'll automatically do that for you. I've got no beef with that. Have fun with it, by all means.
Sure. And, but from my perspective, just do it yourself. But if you're like, okay, I don't want to have to think about it that much. Well, this sounds like a lot of work to me. I don't want to do that. So in that TV area on the other end of the basement, so this is the other side, he's got a 55-inch Vizio PF1 series TV from 2018 with 56 zones of local dimming, which no one ever thought was enough, but that's what we had at the time. every once in a while, the screen will suddenly go black, and then the Vizio logo appears as if someone just turned the TV off and back on again. It only did it rarely in the past, but now it seems to happen like every time they use it. Any ideas if it's a sign that the TV is dying? If so, he's considering the idea of replacing it with an LG OLED, but he sort of wonders if it's actually worth it. It is definitely worth it. Okay, so but before we go on, let's just answer this part. Like, why might this be happening? Is your TV dying? Maybe. When was the last time you replaced the batteries in your remote? Because I've experienced, and other people have as well, that when your batteries are dying in your remote, it sometimes causes the remote to send out extraneous
you get death
IR
flinches
signals
from the batteries.
So I would. It's a very cheap fix.
Definitely,
just plug in, just plug in new batteries and see if it stops happening. If that fixes it, well, then Bob's your uncle and you're done. I'm not saying you can't upgrade your TV, and maybe you should upgrade your TV, but that's one of those unusual things that people don't think of. They're like, oh, the TV is broken. Maybe, or maybe it's just this weird remote thing. And if you've got HDMI CEC going on here,
I was just going to say, I'll double check all the HDMI CEC if any of that is on in any device in the signal chain, right? Maybe you already turned it off in the TV and AV receiver or sound bar that it's connected to, but you're like, oh, it turns out I've got a Roku that I use sometimes, or I've got a cable box that I almost never turn on, but I never check the CEC settings in those, and anything in the signal chain, check the CEC.
And the thing to remember with those two is like, oh, I just added a new device to my system a while ago. And
or something got a firmware update.
That's right. Could have changed everything. And maybe one of their remotes are dying. And then the remote is like turning that device on and off. It's causing your TV to recognize the off happening. And then it's like, oh, wait, but I'm still playing this thing from this other device because of HDMI CC. Power is back on again. Just... There's a lot of things to check.
It could be that, but it could be a power supply in the TV that is beginning to fail, because if anything is going to fail in a TV, it's almost always the power supply, which very often is fixable. It's not necessary to replace the whole TV, but occasionally the way things are now and the way things are designed now, sometimes the correct parts can't be found anymore or not at a reasonable price for the repair, and therefore replacing the whole TV is like cheaper than buying the part you need to fix the power supply. So all of these things are possible. And if you're just looking for an excuse to buy a new TV, this could be as good as any. But yes, check your batteries, remotes, and check all the CEC nonsense.
Absolutely. Okay, so the thing is, he bought a 77-inch LG B4 OLED for his living room upstairs, and while it does look better than his old Vizio, after hearing so much about how great OLED TVs are, I was kind of expecting it to look way more superior than it actually does. Is it a visible difference? Yes, but not night and day like he thought it would be. So is it actually worthwhile to get another OLED TV? I mean, you're saying living room, and that indicates to me a lack of light control.
I'm a little surprised that like the off-axis viewing. I mean, are you watching that living room TV bang on axis all the time? Because usually living room TVs get viewed at some point from off-axis, and I'm like, you had an LCD in there before, and you switched to an OLED, and that wasn't like blazingly obvious how much better the OLED is off-axis. But maybe the only time you turn it on, you're sitting on the couch directly in front of it. So that's not out of the question.
Yeah. So if it were me, so I went from a projector, which is not a direct view TV, to an OLED, and the difference was very night and day. There was no, but I was in a completely light control room. The screen sizes were similar enough that I did not, the viewing angles were the same.
Right.
But the light output was so much better, and the HDR, having it versus not having it, all that other stuff. Going from 56 zones of local dimming to infinite, well, I guess however many millions of zones it would qualify as for the subpixels and everything, is going to make a difference. But would it be like night and day?
Right.
I mean, if you're watching Star Wars, it's going to be, because suddenly there's no blooming happening anymore anywhere on that.
It's, like this doesn't look like a gigantic TV. We're seeing it from far away, but it doesn't look enormous. And if the size is not going to change, like the question kind of is, like for a lower price point, than an OLED of that size. Can you get an LCD TV, a new one, replacing the Vizio still, where it's like, and I'm like, there are some really impressive, not very expensive LCD TVs where I'm like, I will still say I can point out these things where an OLED remains superior, but it's not as though I look at some of these really quite affordable LCD TVs today and go, ugh, that's just ugly. I'm like, no, a lot of them are like, oh, that's a really nice looking image. And it's like, the OLED is a little bit better in some of these areas, but it's not like the LCD is ugly. So if this is a matter of price, if you're like, can I spend less than a B4 OLED costs? I'm like, yeah, you can. You can absolutely spend less than a B4 OLED costs and get an LCD TV to replace that Vizio, where I'm like, yeah, that's a darn good looking TV. Like, a TCL 7 series, not crazy expensive, and I'm like, that's a really nice looking TV. So if you chose to go that way, I've got no problem. It does not have to be an OLED.
How did this podcast get so long?
We talked a lot at the beginning, Tom.
All right, stop it. We're done.
Well, I mean, Gurinder's is super short.
I already scrolled up.
It's like a 2-word answer for Gurinder's.
No. Is that was I right?
Actually, no, I would say, I think, I don't know. Let's read the question. It's like,
Gurinder, if we were using a white level test pattern to adjust the contrast setting on our display, what do we prefer? Have all the white boxes above the 235 level clip into uniform white, or maintain the visibility of all the white test pattern rectangles all the way down to 255? I mean, I don't know. I haven't done that in forever. Rob, answer the question while I scroll up.
So it just depends on, does your TV have a setting that is most often called super white? Because many TVs still have that thing. If it has a super white setting and it is turned on, and I prefer to turn it on, then you should actually be able to see all of those dividing lines all the way up to 255. Because the super white setting is supposed to allow you to see the above white video information, which is the 235 to 255 range. So the only TVs where that wouldn't happen, and it's going to be really obvious, because what you're going to see is that if your TV does not support super white, it doesn't matter what you do, everything above 235 until you get to like sliding it way, way down and it's obviously way too dark, everything above 235 is just going to clip anyway if your TV doesn't support super white. And if it does support super white and it's possible to see those gradients above 235, then you should see them. Because if you turn the contrast all the way up to where you can't, then it means that you've gone too high, you've gone beyond what the super white allows you to see. So basically, if you can see those gradients without turning the slider way, way down, then you should see those gradients.
2 words, people. Did you hear that 2-word answer? This is what I deal with on a weekly basis.
Oh, that was so long compared to the preamble at the beginning.
You
that was
said
so
2 words.
Long.
Preambles. People love our preambles.
They do. Some do. Some hate it. Some don't. Timestamps.
I want to thank the listeners
of the week. Say first, we got Miguel and we've got Zeke on the list. You'll be first up.
That's how long those questions were. To thank our listeners of the week, and thank our 131 patrons over at patreon.com for supporting us every month. Thank you to all of you.
Yeah, that's right. That is patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. So big thanks to our 131 patrons over there.
And thank Gary for having me test out one of his codes for him. You're welcome.
Thank you, Gary.
And got notes of gratitude from John, Ryan, Jack, Miguel, and Zeke. Thank you for thanking us.
That's right. I'll say names one more time. We got John, Ryan, Jack, Miguel, and Zeke. Thank you so much for the notes of gratitude and encouragement. We really appreciate them. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andring.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.